Chapter 931. Meg finally began to feel a little nervous at the sight of so many pairs of eyes staring at him. After all, Amy was going to start taking cultural classes next year, and all of the children here would be her classmates. He couldn't allow Amy's relationship with her classmates to be affected because of him. Thus, he turned to Luna, and asked in a quiet voice, "Are we going in right away?" "Yes, just sit down next to little Amy. There are still some parents who haven't arrived yet, so we'll have to wait for a while." Luna nodded with a smile. She couldn't help but take a glance at the long black box on Meg's back, but she didn't ask any questions. Meg and Sally made their way into the classroom, and nodded with a smile at all of the parents who were looking at them. He was very familiar with this kind of thing, and he would do it every day before school opened, so there was no issue with his friendliness at all. Seeing the smile on Meg's face, all of the parents who were looking at him with suspicion faltered momentarily before smiling back at him. Amy had defeated the Roth Empire Academy on her own, and was already a rising star in Chaos School. At the same time, she was also the disciple of 2 10th-tier magic casters. Of course, it couldn't be better for their children to be in the same class as her. Even if it wasn't to the extent of fawning over her, there was no need for them to put on such long faces. "Hello, Uncle Meg." "Hello, Auntie Aisha." Daphne greeted Meg and Sally, who were sitting next to Amy. She had eaten at the restaurant before, but Amy must have told her in advance. Even though she hesitated for a moment, she didn't make it too obvious. "Hello, Uncle, Auntie." Ignatzu, who was sitting in the back row with a little bean sprout on his head, also greeted them. "Hello, Daphne, Ignatzu." Meg also greeted Daphne and Ignatzu's parents with a smile. Daphne's grandfather had brought her to the last gathering, so this was the first time Meg was meeting Daphne's parents. However, because of Amy and Daphne's relationship, they didn't seem too distant. Daphne's father, Drew, was a mercenary just like her grandfather, Guy. He had a strong build and was a rank 2 knight. His personality was simple and honest. Meg would also meet Ignatzu's parents for the first time. His father, Shozo, was a plant-type demon and a magic caster. He worked in the city lord's castle and specialized in plant-type magic. From his messy hairstyle and crumpled clothes, Meg could basically deduce that he had just been dragged out of the laboratory by the red-haired demoness, Bonnie. "Mr. Meg, it's a pleasure to meet you. If it weren't for the limited space, would really want to show you my newly invented explosive vine ball." "Ah." Shozo looked at Meg with excitement. Shozo's expression immediately twisted, and he swallowed his words. Bonnie, who was sitting beside him, smiled at Meg and Sally, and said, "Hi, Mr. Meg and Ms. Aisha, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for inviting Ignatzu to your gathering. I haven't had the chance to thank you yet." "You're welcome. Ignatzu and Daphne are Amy's good friends. It's my honor to have the children come to the gathering." Meg smiled in response. It seemed that this Mr. Shozo was indeed a research maniac. Even if he came to the parent-teacher conference, he still only had magic in his mind. The 3 pairs of parents chatted with each other. Apart from Sally, who was a little awkward, the atmosphere was quite harmonious. "I didn't think that I would one day be sitting in a classroom for a child's parent-teacher conference and talking about children with other parents." Meg lamented in his heart. The nervousness of attending a parent-teacher conference for the first time had almost disappeared without him noticing. However, Sally, who was sitting beside Meg, was getting more and more nervous. "Ms. Aisha, I have a question that I'm very curious about. Do elves feel pain when giving birth? When I gave birth to my child, it was so painful that I wanted to die." Bonnie looked at Sally curiously. Sally's face was full of embarrassment. She wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. How was she supposed to know such a question? She had never given birth before, okay? Meg wanted to, but there was nothing he could do. It was obviously inappropriate for a man like him to butt in on such a private topic. Moreover, he really didn't know that elves also felt pain when giving birth. Fortunately, it was time, and most of the parents had arrived. Luna walked up to the podium and gestured for everyone to quiet down, just in time to help Sally out of her predicament. The classroom quickly quieted down. The parents all sat up straight, as if they had returned to the classroom. Dear parents, thank you for taking the time to attend the parent-teacher conference. I am Ms. Luna, the head teacher of the second class. Meg realized that the parent-teacher conference in this world was not much different from the one on Earth. The teacher briefly talked about the performance of the middle school students in the past half a semester. Of course, most of it was praise. There were also a few troublemakers, but she only gave them a little advice in a gentle way. Then, it was time to reward the top students who had made great progress in their studies. Small awards and small gifts made the children and their parents very happy. Wasn't the happiest thing in a parent-teacher conference to hear the teacher praise their children? Because Amy didn't participate in the cultural classes, these things had nothing to do with Meg and Amy. They were only responsible for applauding. I want a certificate too. Amy rested her chin on Mag's hand on the table as she looked at the children who were going up on stage to receive their awards enviously. Meg patted Amy's head with his other hand and smiled. You'll get one when Amy starts studying. Daphne had already received 3 awards and 3 books. Her parents were full of smiles. Daphne's grades were among the top 3 in the class. Palmer also received 2 awards. Gilgy looked at the awards with a big smile on his face. Ignatsu, who was sitting in the corner, also didn't get a single award. Shozo didn't care. He played with the 2 dark green seeds in his hand, but Bonnie, who was sitting to Ignatsu's right, looked at him with a stern expression. Ignatsu looked at his mother carefully. When he met her stern gaze, he said meekly, Amy didn't get one either. Luna took out a certificate that was twice as big as the previous one and said with a smile, finally, we're going to give out the Outstanding Contribution Award. This time, the only one who got it is our class. Outstanding Contribution Award. Isn't this award only given out once a year, and the winners are not only limited to students, but also all the teachers in the school? How can it be given to a student in the elementary school? Chapter 932. The school's Outstanding Contribution Award was the highest honor in Chaos School. In the past, it was only given to students and teachers who had made great contributions to the school. This kind of contribution was mainly given to students who had won glory for the school, or teachers who had made important research and inventions. According to the usual practice, the selection was usually only given to students and teachers in the high school. The students in the elementary school were still young, so they obviously couldn't make the Outstanding Contribution Award. But now, Teacher Luna actually said that this year's Outstanding Contribution Award would be given to a student in Class 2. This made many people think that there was something wrong with their ears. How is that possible? That was the only thought in everyone's mind. This certificate is so big. It's so beautiful. Amy looked at the certificate in Luna's hand, and her eyes lit up. Outstanding Contribution Award, sounds a little cool. Meg was also a little confused. He didn't know what this award meant, but that didn't stop him from being happy. Luna wasn't surprised by the parents' reaction, because she had a similar expression when she first received the notice. She raised her voice, and said loudly, the winner of this year's Outstanding Contribution Award is Student Amy. Everyone's gaze turned to Amy in unison. Apart from being shocked, there was also a hint of realization. If there was one student in Class 2 who was qualified to say that she had made an outstanding contribution to Chaos School, then it was indeed only Amy. Of course, not every parent knew about the challenge match and the meaning behind it. They couldn't understand what kind of outstanding contribution this cute half-elf girl, who looked even younger than their own children, had made to Chaos School to be able to receive the Outstanding Contribution Award voted by the Chaos School Committee. Amy was also stunned. She looked up at Meg and asked softly, "So, Father, did I get the last certificate?" "Yes, that certificate belongs to you." Meg nodded with a proud smile on his face. Luna looked at Amy and said with a smile, "In the challenge match more than a month ago, student Amy made an outstanding contribution to defeating the challengers from the Roth Empire. She ended Chaos School's 4 consecutive years of defeat and won a precious honor for Chaos School. Because of that, the school committee unanimously agreed to give the Outstanding Contribution Award to student Amy as a form of encouragement. Now, let's invite student Amy to come up to the stage to receive the award. Go." Meg patted Amy's shoulder gently and smiled. Amy jumped down from her chair and walked to the podium with her short legs. She tiptoed to take the certificate from Luna's hands and raised it in front of her, completely covering her upper body. After a while, she seemed to feel that this wasn't enough. She stuck her little head out from the side and smiled happily at everyone. There was a round of applause from below the stage, especially from the children who had watched the match. They were all certain that Amy deserved this certificate. "Amy is awesome," Daphne exclaimed happily, her little face full of joy. "Amy is indeed super awesome." Ignatzu also clapped his little hands excitedly. "See, it's not that Amy doesn't have one. She just took the biggest one." Bonnie glanced at Ignatzu, and her gaze gradually turned cold. "Little brat, if you don't get one next year, I'll beat your father up too." "What does this have to do with me?" Shozo, who was still playing with the seeds in his hands, shivered and said innocently, "It's your fault if you don't teach your children well. You only know how to play with your seeds all day long. When have you ever cared about your children or your family? If you're so capable, you can go with them." Bonnie glared at Shozo fiercely. Shozo was instantly stunned. He shrunk his head and looked at Ignatzu and earnestly said, "Son, you have to learn hard next year. Otherwise, both of our butts will suffer." "It's okay, Father. I'm already used to it." Ignatzu looked at Shozo pitifully. "Thank you." Amy thanked Luna, and then jumped down from the podium with the certificate. She jumped into the arms of Meg and Sally, and happily said, "Father, Mother, I got the certificate." "That's great," Meg said with a smile as he patted Amy's head. Sally's body stiffened, but she was quickly infected by Amy's happiness. What an obedient and adorable child. Although she wasn't her real mother, she felt a little enlightened at this moment. She looked at the smiling Meg and the happy Amy in his arms. If all of this was real, this family of 3 didn't seem too bad. After Meg received the most important certificate in Chaos School, the atmosphere in the classroom became a little strange. Compared to the School Contribution Award, the other awards were more or less important. Although the parents tried to make themselves look more natural, the atmosphere was still a little strange when they looked at the certificate in Amy's arms. There was a commotion and uproar in the other classrooms. Apparently, the form teachers of the various classes had also announced who would receive the School Contribution Award this year. This was the first time in Chaos School's 100 years of existence that a student from the elementary class had received the School Contribution Award. In the principal's office, the balding dean looked at Novin and said, "Principal, it seems that there are still a lot of doubts about awarding the School Contribution Award to Amy. Aren't we being too hasty?" Novin stood at the window with a smile and said, "Amy's contribution to Chaos School is more than what they see. If it weren't for her, why would the Crassus build a magic room in Chaos School? Why would they teach the students melee magic? This is something that even the disciples of the Magus Tower don't learn. The dean fell silent. After a while, he hesitated and said, "We know all of this, but they don't. Since when do we need to explain Chaos School's matters to others? Don't forget, Chaos School's matters are Chaos School's matters. Even the City Lord's castle and the Grey Temple can't interfere." Novin pursed his lips and coldly said, "Tell those old fogies that if they really did contribute to the school, everyone can see it. This award won't be given to those fellows who are racking their brains to scam funding from the higher-ups." The dean's expression changed slightly. After a while, he nodded and said, "Okay." Then, he turned and left. In the quiet principal's office, Novin looked at the teaching building not far away, and sighed. That old fogey Crassus didn't want this award. I have no choice but to give it to that little fellow. Chapter 933. Meg also sensed the unfriendly atmosphere around him. He felt a little helpless. What could he do? It wasn't his fault that his daughter was too outstanding. How could he refuse her? This feels great. Meg smiled as he resisted the envious gazes. He was in a better mood than when he received his admission letter. Luna also sensed the awkward atmosphere in the classroom. She smiled and said, "Congratulations to those who have been rewarded for their hard work. I also encourage all of you to work harder." Next up is parent-child time. Parents are usually busy with work and rarely have the opportunity to be with their children. The school is taking advantage of the parent-teacher conference to allow parents to gather by their children's side. We hope that parents and children can have a more friendly and in-depth relationship. Some children and parents have prepared performances for this parent-teacher conference. Let's enjoy their performances. Hearing Luna's words, the parents withdrew their gazes and spontaneously cleared the tables and chairs in the middle of the classroom. The children and parents who had signed up for the performance began to perform on stage. The unprofessional performances of the children and parents drew a burst of cheerful laughter from the crowd. The atmosphere gradually eased and became harmonious again. It was inevitable that they would be envious of the achievements of other children, but after all, the children were still their own. This kind of family interaction was rare, so the parents quickly immersed themselves in the singing and dancing. "Father, are we going to perform Spring is Here?" Amy looked up at Meg expectantly. Sally also looked at Meg with a hint of a smile in her eyes. If Meg also went on stage, she wouldn't mind performing Spring is Here as well. This can't do. Meg looked at Amy's expectant gaze. In the end, his rationality prevailed over his impulsiveness. She wanted him to perform the Gokuraku Jodo. Was the female outfit ready? If the host wants, the system will provide a full range of female outfits delivered to the host's door. In addition, the host can choose any female outfit for free. The system's excited voice sounded. Tui. This wasn't about the female outfit at all. In any case, he couldn't perform it. He had to save face. Meg rolled his eyes. This system really knew how to respond to anything. All right. Amy was a little disappointed. Then she turned to Sally and asked expectantly, "Mother, can you dance with me?" Sally felt her heart tremble as she was stared at by the big blue eyes and heard the soft voice calling her mother. She couldn't help but nod. "Mother, you're the best," Amy said happily as she threw herself into Sally's arms. She was so happy to be pampered. Sally had a doting smile on her face as she gently stroked the little girl's head. Even if she could only be Amy's mother for one day, she would still be happy. After returning to the Wind Forest, she would have to do many things. She was afraid that she would no longer have such a relaxed and comfortable life, and she would no longer have such a cute little fellow calling her mother. Thinking of this, Sally's gaze became even gentler. Since that was the case, why not enjoy these last happy moments? Meg looked at Sally and felt that this girl had suddenly become a little different. She was clearly a cold girl, but when she hugged Amy, she gave him a feeling of motherly love. This moment of harmony even made him feel that she was Amy's mother. What a good girl. Meg sighed in his heart. Then, he thought of Irina. Then, he calmed down. The performance was very simple and down-to-earth, but it was full of childlike interest. Even Meg enjoyed watching it. He never thought that a person who could fall asleep at a concert would one day be able to watch a performance by a small class of children and laugh in the audience. It's probably because she's getting old. Meg thought to himself. Then, he bought a small subwoofer speaker from the system. He still needed a player to play Gokuraku Jodo. The performance that had been registered in advance was quickly finished. A few children dragged their parents onto the stage to perform a few more acts. Only then did the lively atmosphere die down a little. Is there anyone else who wants to bring their parents to perform for everyone? Luna looked at everyone encouragingly. Teacher Luna, I want to perform Spring is Here with my mother. Amy raised her little hand. Luna looked at Amy and Sally and smiled. Okay, then let's invite our little Amy and her mother to perform Spring is Here for everyone. Sally stood up graciously and walked to the center of the classroom with Amy. Applause rang out. Everyone looked at this extremely good-looking pair of mother and daughter, and they were all curious about what kind of performance they would perform. Elves were famous for being good at singing and dancing. Dancing requires some music. This is not a monster, but a player. Children, don't be scared. Meg took out the mini speaker that had just arrived and reminded them with a smile. Then, he pressed the play button. The lively and joyful drum beats of Gokuraku Jodo sounded. Amy and Sally began to dance. Their light steps, just the right amount of strength, and precise and elegant movements were all pleasing to the eye. Amy is so good. She's like a little butterfly. Daphne clasped her hands in front of her chest, and her eyes were full of stars. It's so beautiful. The parents and children couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Compared to the previous performances, Amy and Sally's dance was too professional. What was even more curious was how that small cylinder could produce such a high-pitched and beautiful music. Could it be that there was a little person hiding inside it? After one song, Sally and Amy smiled and greeted everyone before returning to their seats. The applause was thunderous and genuine. Everyone had been completely won over by Amy and Sally's dance. It was really difficult to be jealous of such little girls. After the applause died down, Luna asked again with a smile. After confirming that no one was going to perform again, she announced that it was time for parent-child free time. Some parents started to distribute the snacks they had brought, and some gave out exquisite little gifts. The children who received the snacks and small gifts had happy smiles on their faces. This was probably their favorite part of the dance. Amy's arms were full of snacks and small gifts as she looked at Meg expectantly and asked, "Father, did you prepare gifts for the children?" Chapter 934. When Meg pulled out the folding grill from under the black cloth and took out a box of beef kebabs, the noisy classroom suddenly fell silent. Everyone looked at the grill that Meg had set up and the fresh beef in the incubator with peculiar expressions on their faces. They had attended many parent-teacher conferences, but this was the first time they had heard of someone bringing a grill to school. Was he preparing to roast meat for the children? The teachers were also trying hard not to laugh. What was going on? A parent-teacher conference turning into a barbecue event. Mr. Meg. Luna wanted to say something, but stopped. Although she couldn't say what was wrong, she still felt that it was a little strange. Meg also realized that his beef kebabs were a little inappropriate, but since he had already brought them, it would be weird to bring them back. He could only brace himself and say, "Teacher Luna, I prepared some beef kebabs for the children. Can we roast them outside?" Beef kebabs are better when roasted on the spot. He really wants to roast beef for the children on the spot. Everyone roared with laughter. This was probably the most difficult request a parent had ever made in a parent-teacher conference. "Did Mr. Mack misunderstand what I said this morning?" George muttered to himself with a strange expression on his face. "Honey, what did you say to Mr. Mack this morning?" Miranda asked in a small voice. "I said that parents usually bring snacks and gifts for the children. Maybe Mr. Mack's idea of snacks is beef kebabs." George shrugged, but a smile soon appeared on his face. "However, we might be in for a treat today." Luna was a little confused. She had never encountered such a situation before, nor had she heard of it from other teachers. According to the school's rules, there was no rule forbidding parents from bringing roasted meat to the parent-teacher conference. However, this was a school after all, and it seemed a little inappropriate to roast meat at school. This made Luna a little confused. "My father's beef kebabs are super delicious. You can't find any better in the world," Amy said proudly to the children. "Mommy, I want to eat beef kebabs. I want to eat too. I want to eat too." After being tempted by Amy and imagining the piping hot barbecue, the children couldn't stay calm anymore. The half-bald lingua franca teacher smiled and said, "Ms. Luna, I think Mr. Meg's suggestion is very interesting. Didn't the school say that we can't have a barbecue during the parent-teacher conference? Why don't we set a precedent?" "That's right. It's rare for our class to receive this year's School Contribution Award. This is an honor that the kindergarten has never received before." The teacher nodded in agreement. Luna looked at the enthusiastic students and the smiling Meg. She hesitated for a moment before nodding with a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Meg. All right." With Luna's permission, Meg carried the grill and beef out of the classroom. He did not forget to turn around and say to Amy, "Amy, I need your help. I'm happy to be of service." Amy skipped after him, her little face full of smiles. It was really a blessing to be able to eat delicious beef kebabs at school. Class, too, was on the first floor, and there was an open space outside the door. Meg set up the grill in the open space and placed the various condiments and sauces on the grill. The children and parents in the classroom poked their heads out and looked curiously through the windows and doors. "Amy, use a small fireball to burn all the charcoal red," Meg said as he pointed to the smokeless charcoal in the grill. "Okay." Amy nodded. A purple-red flame appeared in her palm and condensed into a small fireball, which she threw into the pile of charcoal. The flame lit up and went out. In the blink of an eye, all the smokeless charcoal in the grill had been ignited. It was bright red and radiated heat evenly. Sally stood to the side and watched with a smile. She couldn't help much with the kebabs, but she could help distribute them to the children after they were done. "Wow, magic!" The children looked at this scene with amazement and admiration on their faces. For them, magic was still a distant thing, but Amy could already make a fireball with her fingers. "Very good. Thank you, Amy," Meg said with a smile. Sure enough, it was much faster to let Amy light the fire than to use alcohol or something like that. Moreover, the intensity of the charcoal fire was just right, so it was suitable to be used directly for barbecuing, saving a lot of time. Barbecuing meat directly outdoors is completely unhygienic. Also, we don't know if the source of the beef is clean and healthy. Our children and I will never eat barbecued meat like this. A thin man with slick back hair and shiny hair wax, who was dressed very well, curled his lips and said, "Yeah, we still have to pay attention to the food we give our children. Our children are never allowed to eat this outside. Even if they eat outside, they have to bring their own tableware. A young woman in a long green dress sitting beside him chimed in. She had a chubby little boy in her arms, and her eyes were full of love. I won't eat it. The little boy, Joseph, nodded firmly. He then asked in a small voice, Mother, can I have 3 fried chickens when we go back later? Joseph's parents' words also made some parents concerned. Even though Amy's father had good intentions, every child was their treasure, so the parents were a little hesitant about whether they should let their children eat this barbecued meat. Pay attention. Mr. Mack is much more particular than you. Can you find another restaurant in Chaos City that is cleaner than Amy's? George sneered as he looked at the couple. He was looking at Meg, who had already begun to put the kebabs on the grill, with an expectant look on his face. Looks like I have to work harder. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't even be able to see her heels. Palmer, who was sitting by the window, thought to himself as he looked at the certificate in Amy's hands. There shouldn't be a problem, right? Luna looked in the direction of the principal's office with a worried expression. Even though the school didn't stipulate this, she was the first class teacher to allow parents to have barbecued meat in the school. The marinated beef kebabs were placed on the hot grill, and oil seeped out of the juicy beef, making a beautiful sizzling sound. The aroma of roast beef gradually began to waft through the air, and became stronger and stronger as it spread in all directions. Chapter 935. The rich aroma wafted through the air, and almost everyone in the school building could smell the roast beef. They couldn't help but exclaim in admiration as they tried to find the source of the aroma. Let me tell you, this is the worst batch of students I've ever taught. Even the kids in the lower class have won the school's contribution award, but your children are still transferring books and pens and not studying. The bald homeroom teacher of Class 6, 2, who was nearing retirement, was lecturing the children and parents in the classroom on the 6th floor. As one of the oldest teachers in Chaos School, many of the parents in the classroom were his students, so they naturally didn't dare to refute him. They could only listen to his lecture with their children, and also experience being lectured by their homeroom teacher again. However, there was a small commotion in the originally quiet classroom. The aroma was like a kitten's paw, gently scratching their hearts. The students and parents couldn't help but look out of the classroom. The aroma was coming from outside, and it smelled like roast beef. However, this was Chaos School, and it wasn't time for the cafeteria to open yet. Who would be roasting beef in school? And during a parent-teacher conference? Who's roasting the meat? It smells so good. Yeah, I'm hungry just by smelling it. The students and parents whispered among themselves, full of curiosity. They even forgot about their homeroom teacher, Hamilton, who was famous for his strictness and iron rule. Hamilton's eyes suddenly became stern. Very few people dared to whisper when he was speaking, not even their parents. Then, he also smelled the aroma of roast beef. His eyes lit up, but his brows were tightly furrowed. As he walked out of the classroom, he murmured, "Who dares to roast beef in the school? And, it smells so good." The same thing happened in all the classrooms in the kindergarten. The teachers in the strict classes walked out into the hallways, and the students and parents in the relaxed classes also rushed out into the hallways, trying to find that mouth-watering aroma. It's just roast beef. Why is the aroma so tempting? Is this really roast beef? I've eaten roast beef so many times, but I've never smelled anything like this before. Amy's father is so handsome. It's like he's magic. Ma, I want to eat. Class, too, was directly facing Mag's grill, so they could smell the strongest aroma of the grill. He didn't sense any greasy or pungent smell, only the purest fragrance. It didn't make any sense. The children and their parents had already fallen in love with him. Looking at the kebabs that Meg was flipping deftly in his hands, they couldn't help but swallow their saliva. The worries in the hearts of the parents were swept away. At this moment, they were thinking about whether they would be able to eat a kebab other than their children. There were quite a lot of kebabs on the grill, and they wondered if one of them would belong to them. At the same time, the parents began to look at Mag in a different light. At first, he thought that it would be a bronze-ranked player, but he did not expect it to be a king-ranked player. Gulp, Joseph swallowed a mouthful of saliva as his chubby stomach rumbled twice. He raised his head to look at his mother, who also couldn't help but secretly swallow a mouthful of saliva, and softly said, "Mother, can I take back what I said just now?" This. Joseph's mother glanced at his father, Bevis, and didn't dare to agree. No matter how tempting the aroma is, it's not as clean and hygienic as a proper restaurant. Joseph, as a descendant of nobility, you have to learn to restrain yourself. Bevis looked at Joseph, paused, and said, "If you can resist it, I'll buy you 3 fried chicken today." Really? Joseph's eyes lit up, and he immediately nodded his little head and said, "Then I won't eat, I want 3 fried chicken." There it is. The other people in the teaching building finally found the source of the disturbing aroma. Their gazes fell on the grill in front of Meg. They could see the large number of kebabs being flipped in Meg's hands, and then brushed with the sauce. The tempting aroma was coming from there. Oh my God! Someone is actually roasting beef at a parent-teacher conference. This parent is probably crazy, right? He's not crazy, but I'm going crazy. Didn't we say we're here for the parent-teacher conference? Why is he torturing me like this? Everyone was surprised, and they couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Isn't that little student Amy who won the school's contribution award? It's her. Could it be that the person roasting the kebabs is her father? That beautiful elf sister standing next to her is her mother. She has a beautiful mother and a father who can cook. I'm so envious. Soon, another student recognized Amy, and it caused a new wave of envy. Meg placed the large number of kebabs in his hands in the low-temperature section, and said with a smile, "All right, the first round of kebabs is for the children and teachers. Can a few parents come out and help distribute them? Let's do it." George and his wife were the first to stand up and walk out of the door. Soon, a few other parents spontaneously came forward to help distribute the kebabs. Joseph doesn't need it. Bevis rejected the kebabs that George handed to Joseph. I don't want it. Joseph's gaze moved away from the kebabs with difficulty, and he muttered in his heart, "Fried chicken. Fried chicken. Fried chicken." George didn't force him. He shrugged and handed the kebabs in his hands to the child next to him. "Children, the kebabs are still a little hot. Remember to blow on them before eating. Be careful not to burn yourself." Meg didn't forget to remind them. He walked over to Luna and the other teachers with a few kebabs in his hands, and said with a smile, "Teachers, have a taste too. I'm drooling just from smelling the aroma. We're in for a treat today." The language teacher took a kebab and took a bite. The kebabs were still a little hot. The language teacher's eyes widened, and he almost couldn't help but vomit. However, the burning sensation on the tip of his tongue was quickly replaced by the deliciousness that followed. The slightly charred skin and the garlic-flavored sauce first melted in his mouth. The garlic aroma that usually assaulted his nose was particularly gentle and delicious at this moment, making him salivate. After chewing carefully, the tender kebabs melted in his mouth. The aroma of garlic and meat wafted out from the meat, and the deliciousness bloomed in his mouth instantly. With every bite, he could feel his taste buds cheering, and he simply couldn't stop eating. After swallowing the kebabs, the language teacher couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh! It's really unbelievably delicious. I've never eaten such delicious food before." The children took a bite of the kebabs, and for a moment, they were full of praise. Chapter 936. The faces of the children who were eating the kebabs were brimming with happy smiles. There was probably nothing more delightful in this world than enjoying delicious food. Deliciousness didn't need to be described with words. Just looking at the children's expressions was enough. The parents sat beside their children with smiles on their faces. At the same time, they looked at Meg with some admiration. When the children went up on stage to receive the award, they didn't seem as happy and blissful as they were now. Meg's culinary skills were really amazing. She's so lucky. Her husband is not only handsome and gentle, but his culinary skills are also so good. It's really enviable. The women looked at Sally with eyes full of envy. Then they looked at the man sitting beside them. He was only in his 30s, but his figure was already completely out of shape. He usually didn't do anything at home, let alone cook. This comparison was simply infuriating. Meg didn't know that he had inexplicably become the role model of a good man in the hearts of women. He also didn't know that he had become the public enemy of men because of a kebab. However, looking at the children who were eating happily, he also had a smile on his face and began the second round of kebabs. Father. Joseph didn't know how many times he had swallowed his saliva. He looked up at Bevis with longing in his eyes. It's already been distributed, Bevis said expressionlessly. His throat moved, and there was some annoyance in his eyes. How could this guy's kebabs be so delicious? It could make all the children eat so happily. Joseph, the kebabs are really delicious. It's really a pity that you can't eat them. The little boy sitting at the side had his mouth full of oil. He looked at Joseph with pity and then took another bite of beef and chewed happily. Sigh. Joseph sighed. There was once a kebab placed in front of him and he didn't cherish it. It was only after he lost it that he regretted it. If God could give him a chance to start over, he would definitely say, "Please have another kebab." The children and the teacher are all eating. It shouldn't be a problem. Moreover, everyone is eating. It doesn't seem right if only our family doesn't eat. Joseph's mother whispered as she looked at Bevis. The rich fragrance floating in the air was mouth-watering, but her stubborn husband made things difficult for her. Bevis looked at the smiling children and parents. The family of 3 did look a little strange. After a moment of silence, he said, "You guys eat." "I'm not eating." Joseph abruptly jumped up from his chair and ran toward George, who was about to leave with the remaining 2 kebabs in his hands. "Uncle George!" he yelled as he ran toward George. "Give me a bunch. I want to eat too." George turned around to look at the chubby Joseph, and a smile appeared on his face as he handed a kebab to him. "Thank you." Joseph gave his thanks and trotted back to his seat with the kebab in hand. He cautiously glanced at Bevis and hesitantly handed the kebab to him. He whispered, "Father, why don't you have a bite first?" "I'm not eating," Bevis refused coldly and turned his gaze to the other side of the window. "You eat it, Joseph." His mother touched Joseph's head and smiled. She then looked at Bevis helplessly. Her husband was good at everything, but he was too stubborn and prideful. Joseph nodded and took a bite of the beef. His eyes lit up as he chewed quickly with his chubby cheeks. The expression on his chubby face became extremely happy and radiant. After swallowing a piece of beef, Joseph exclaimed, "Wow, it's so delicious. I don't think there's anything better than this in the world. Even fried chicken can't compare to it. Looks like it's really delicious." Even Joseph's favorite fried chicken pales in comparison, Joseph's mother thought to herself. Joseph's mother thought to herself as she looked at Mag, who was still grilling beef kebabs with an earnest expression. Both his technique and demeanor exuded a sense of professionalism, and the kitchenware and ingredients used were all quite clean. As such, she began to reevaluate her previous assessment of Mag. Joseph took another look at Bevis and handed the kebab to his mother. He whispered, "Mother, you should try it too. It's really delicious." "Okay." His mother hesitated for a moment, but still lowered her head and took a small bite of the beef. The sauce on the surface of the beef and the delicious gravy instantly awakened her taste buds. She chewed lightly, and the gravy splashed in her mouth, colliding with the sauce and condiments to create an incredible taste. It was as if a thunderbolt fireball had exploded in her mouth, and then turned into countless thunderbolt fireballs. The taste had completely exploded. "Oh!" Joseph's mother's face lit up immediately. Words couldn't describe the taste. It was amazing. She was born into a noble family in Rodu, and had tasted many delicious restaurants in Rodu. However, she had never tasted such delicious food. She couldn't help but be immersed in it. Bevis snuck a glance at his wife from the corner of his eyes. His throat moved uncontrollably as he thought doubtfully, "It's just a kebab of beef. Can it really be so delicious? But this aroma is indeed extraordinary. Even Duca's restaurant can't smell this aroma," Bevis thought to himself. He shifted his gaze away from the kebab in Joseph's hand. "But I've already said those words. I can't eat it now even if I want to. This is for the parents. Please distribute it among yourselves," Meg said with a smile as the second round of kebabs was quickly completed. The parents, who were already waiting anxiously, were all excited. If it weren't for the fact that they were too embarrassed, they would have snatched it from their children. Luckily, Mr. Mag was considerate enough to prepare a portion for them. "Do you want it?" George asked with a smile as he walked over to Joseph's family with the kebab in his hand. Joseph's mother reached out to take a kebab, and then smiled. "My husband, thank you." Before she could finish her sentence, Bevis had already reached out to take the kebab from George's hand. "Seems like he changed his mind." George shrugged and continued walking forward. Joseph and his mother turned to look at Bevis at the same time. Their expressions were a little strange. "You're right. Everyone is eating. If I'm the only one who doesn't eat, it will seem strange. This is not in line with our humble upbringing. It may also cause Joseph to be isolated because of this," Bevis said calmly. "So, although it may not be very clean, I've decided to force myself to take a bite." After saying that, he took a bite of the kebab. Chapter 937. What's going on? The commotion in the elementary school building had also attracted the attention of the administration building. Dean, who had just finished a heart-to-heart talk with a few professors, furrowed his brows. It wasn't unusual for parent-teacher conferences to be lively. The school's original intention was to allow children and parents to interact more and cultivate feelings. However, listening to the noise now, it didn't seem to be the case. It was more like a bustling market. Dean, I think it's caused by a parent roasting beef kebabs in the elementary school," an assistant teacher said with a strange expression. "Beef kebabs? Which muddle-headed parent would actually roast beef in a place like the school?" Dean raised his eyebrows and exclaimed, "Could it be because the barbecue was on fire? Otherwise, why would there be such a commotion? There's no fire. It's because the smell of the roast meat is too fragrant. The students and parents can't sit still anymore," the assistant said with a sigh. The assistant said with some emotion, "That wonderful fragrance is really too amazing." Many teachers in the administrative building specially rushed over. "Nonsense. As a teacher, how can you be so disrespectful?" Dean waved his sleeves and walked to the door with a dark expression. "The homeroom teacher of elementary school is Luna, right? Looks like she's gotten a little carried away after being praised by the principal. Now that she's causing such a commotion, we'll become a laughingstock. I have to talk to her." "Dean, the principal." the assistant said weakly as he watched Dean disappear through the door. He's also there. Dean walked to the entrance of elementary school with a dark expression. When he was about to interrogate the principal, he suddenly saw the principal standing in front of the grill with a beef kebab in his hand. He said with a smile, "Children, we would like to thank Mr. Meg for bringing us such a delicious feast. This small beef kebab is the embodiment of the best cooking in Chaos City. Even the king of the Roth Empire didn't get to taste this kebab at his birthday banquet. This Amy's father won the Best Chef award at the king's birthday banquet not long ago. The restaurant he opened in Aiden Square is called Mamie's. I'm sure some of the customers have heard of it, right? Amazing." After hearing Novan's words, everyone looked at Meg in a different light. They felt that the beef kebab in their hands had become heavier. He's actually the chef who attended the king's birthday banquet? And he won the Best Chef award. Bevis's eyes were filled with shock. He thought of what he had said before, and blushed. He lowered his head and took a bite of beef. Oh! He's indeed the chef that even the king's praises. This beef is too delicious. Bevis praised in his heart. Father seems to like it too. This is a terrible thing. Adults really like to deceive people. Their mouths say they don't want it, but their bodies are honest. Joseph looked at Bevis with some disappointment. Mamie's? I think it's a very famous restaurant in Aiden Square recently. I've heard from my friends that you have to wait for a long time to go there, but it's still full every day. Also, the price is even more expensive than Dukas restaurant. He's the boss and the head chef. Joseph's mother was also looking at Mag with astonishment on her face. Mr. Mac, of course I'm very familiar with it. I feel uncomfortable all over if I don't go to Mamie's for a day. A few of Mamie's regulars continued Novan's words, and caused a round of laughter. You're too kind, Principal. It's my honor to be able to make a beef kebab for the children and teachers. Meg looked up at the crowd in the corridor, and apologetically said, also, my actions were too reckless. I've disrupted the order of the parent-teacher conference. Dean looked at the scene, and his expression was completely frozen. He had come to denounce the culprit, but he bumped into the principal praising the culprit. And this culprit was the father of Amy, who had just won the school's contribution award. You'll have to ask our dean if you've disrupted the order. Novan turned to Dean with a smile, and said, Dean, you also came because of the aroma, right? Do you want to try the beef kebab that Mr. Meg just made, and then we can talk about this disruption? Of course I have to try the food that the principal praised. Dean controlled his expression, and walked up with a smile. However, this smile was still very intimidating in the eyes of the students. The scariest person in Chaos School was not Principal Novan, but Dean, who was known as the Smiling Tiger. Dean! Luna was a little nervous. Not only did the students call him the Smiling Tiger, but the teachers also called him the Smiling Tiger in private. Even the teachers were afraid of him. Meg's kebab had caused such a huge commotion, and he wasn't here to denounce them, was he? Please have a taste, Dean. Meg handed the last kebab to Dean with a smile. The kebab was already done, and the students and parents were late for the kebab. The worst that could happen was that his tools would be confiscated, so he wasn't that nervous. Dean accepted the kebab and took a bite. He wasn't expecting much at first, but after the kebab entered his mouth, his eyes immediately lit up. He had never tasted anything like this before, and the taste buds on the tip of his tongue were jumping with joy. The more he chewed, the more fragrant the kebab became. This feeling was so blissful. After finishing the kebab in one go, Dean still wanted more. He gave Meg a thumbs up and said, You're right, Principal. This kebab is indeed a delicious feast. I can understand why everyone is attracted by the aroma. It is indeed irresistible. Everyone laughed upon hearing that. They didn't think that the smiling tiger would have a reasonable side to him. Chapter 938. The parent-teacher conference ended in a relatively harmonious atmosphere. Meg folded up the barbecue rack that Sally had cooled and cleaned, wrapped it in a black cloth, and carried it on his back. Holding Amy's hand, he followed the crowd to the school gate. "Goodbye, Uncle Meg." "Bye-bye, Amy." "Amy, remember to ask your father to cook for us next time." Along the way, the children of Class 2 greeted Meg and Amy. Obviously, they had been completely won over by Meg's cooking. The parent-teacher conference is so fun. I love it. Amy held Meg's hand with her left hand and Sally's with her right hand with a happy smile on her face. Meg and Sally looked at each other and smiled at the same time. "Thank you," Meg looked at Sally and said earnestly. "You're welcome." Sally looked down at Amy and smiled. "This is also an interesting and wonderful experience for me. Sister Aisha, it would be great if you could live with us forever." Amy looked up at Sally and smiled. Sally's heart trembled at the sight of Amy's innocent smile, and she fell into a momentary daze. "That's right. If I could live a carefree and happy life like this, then it would indeed be very satisfying," but she smiled and didn't say anything. Amy didn't mind Sally's silence. Looking at her face, she continued, "Sister Aisha, you look so beautiful when you smile. Smile more every day in the future." "Yes, I will." Sally was slightly taken aback, and then nodded. She had indeed smiled a lot today. Meg easily pushed his bicycle out of the horse-drawn carriages, much to the envy of all of the horse-drawn carriage drivers. "Hold on tight, we're going." Amy sat on the crossbar of the bicycle, and Sally sat on the back seat. Meg reminded them and then stepped hard on the pedals, and the bicycle rushed out with a whoosh. Sally's body swayed, and she subconsciously reached out and hugged Meg's waist. Meg's body stiffened. Although he was no longer a teenager, being hugged by a fairy-like girl sitting on the back seat of the bicycle reminded him of his youth. Thinking back, he felt a little happy, and then he gradually relaxed. Sally also quickly realized that her actions were a little inappropriate, and a blush immediately appeared on her face. She wanted to withdraw her hand, but she could feel the scorching heat from his abs under his white shirt, as well as the solid back in front of her. After a moment of hesitation, she didn't withdraw her hand in the end. Instead, she gently pressed her face against his back. "We're going to leave soon. Perhaps we won't see each other again in this lifetime. It's a pity that I wasn't the first to meet such a man. Even if I do meet him now, I still won't be able to stay by his side. Then let's just hug each other tightly for a while." Sally closed her eyes and smiled. The bicycle stopped in front of Amy's, and Sally alighted from it. Her expression had returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Meg was also at ease. He carried Amy down from the crossbar of the bicycle, opened the door, and carried the bicycle inside. He had to start preparing the ingredients for tonight's dinner. "Did the parent-teacher conference go smoothly today? Aisha, did you really pretend to be Amy's mother? Did anyone see through you?" Yabamiya asked curiously as soon as they entered the door. Babla and Phyllis were also very curious about this. Amy picked up Ugly Duckling with a smile and said, "No, Big Sister Aisha was very good at acting. I didn't see through you at all. Because I didn't have to do anything the whole time." Sally spread her hands and said helplessly, "I got the biggest award in class today. Do you guys want to see it?" Amy ran to the bicycle and took out the big award that she had rolled up. Everyone gathered around curiously and praised Amy again. Meg, who had just changed into his chef's uniform, shook his head with a smile. What a harmonious and loving scene. After entering the kitchen, Meg saw slices of roast duck laid out on the cutting table. They were sliced from left to right in a sequential order, and he could clearly see that there was an improvement. At first, the flaky skin was damaged, and the thickness was uneven. Gradually, he could see that the skin was completely attached to the duck meat, and the thickness of the duck meat gradually became even. By the 10th duck, the thickness of the duck meat was almost indistinguishable. Every piece of duck meat was in perfect condition. It was an amazing skill. Meg looked back at Phyllis, who had appeared at the kitchen door, and said with a smile, 108 slices. Not a single piece of duck meat was wasted. It's perfect. Sigh, the daily life of a hack is indeed enviable. Meg sighed in his heart. He was indeed very envious. In order to master the skill of slicing duck, he had sliced more than 5,000 ducks in the test field for the god of cookery. That was how he had been able to slice a duck perfectly into 108 slices. But now, Phyllis had only used an afternoon to practice on 10 roast ducks, and she had successfully mastered the skill of slicing duck. Comparing oneself to others was simply infuriating. Can I really do it? Phyllis's face lit up with surprise. She even found it hard to believe. Yes, Phyllis. From today onwards, the task of slicing roast ducks will be handed over to you. I believe you have the ability to do it well. Meg nodded. Although he was envious, it was undoubtedly a good thing for the restaurant that Phyllis could master the skill of slicing roast ducks so quickly. I'll do my best. Phyllis looked into Meg's eyes, which were filled with trust, and nodded solemnly. Meg's roast beef kebabs at Chaos School this afternoon had become the biggest joke of the year. Furthermore, Amy had received an Exceptional School Contribution Award, so it had naturally attracted a lot of attention. As a result, the number of customers lining up outside the restaurant had increased explosively, and the line had already begun to circle around the square. Many of the parents who had been brought to tears by the aroma of the roast beef kebabs had brought their wives and children to the restaurant for the sake of tasting the food that had been praised to the heavens by the principal and the dean of students. Of course, after entering the restaurant, the families who weren't very well off all wore reluctant expressions after seeing the prices on the menu. Some of them excused themselves, saying that they didn't have any food that they liked, while others bought a beef kebab for their children. As for the parents who could afford the price, they happily sat down and waited for the food to be served. Joseph's family of 3 was currently sitting at a table in the corner of the restaurant. Chapter 939. With Phyllis's help, Meg's efficiency increased again. 100 roast ducks could feed 200 customers, so the number of customers served at Amy's had increased to 500. Of course, this didn't include the customers who ate beef kebabs and laggi ruggiamo on the way. Everything else was fine, but Meg felt sorry for Yabamiya, who was serving the dishes with trembling hands, and Sally, who was receiving so much money that her hands went limp. Damn it, I was so emotional today that I forgot to put up a recruitment notice. Meg looked on at the departing customers, and a very important thought suddenly occurred to him. Sally was going to be leaving after today. With the restaurant's current situation, he was afraid that he would have to stop working. Meg looked at Sally, who was clearing the table, and sighed silently. As expected, he still didn't want her to leave. He was even subconsciously avoiding this matter. However, Sally was going to leave in the end. He would put up a recruitment notice tomorrow and reduce the number of customers. He would slowly increase the number of employees when he found suitable ones. Meg still didn't want to put too many waiters in the restaurant. He didn't like the feeling of being too crowded. After the dinner service, the finishing work was quickly done. Yabamiya held Barbara's arm and looked at Sally with a smile. Aisha, let's go back. It's so cold tonight. I'm going back a little later. Sally shook her head slightly. She looked at Yabamiya and Barbara and hesitated for a moment. Then she went up to them and hugged them. She smiled and said, "It's so nice to meet you." Yabamiya and Barbara looked at Sally in confusion. They didn't know why she suddenly had such a strange feeling. "I also think it's so nice to meet you." Yabamiya nodded and said with a smile, "Then come back early. It's so cold outside." "Boss, we'll go back first." "Let's go." Barbara took a deep look at Sally, raised her hand, and left hand in hand with Yabamiya and Phyllis. "Are you sure you don't want to say goodbye to them formally?" Meg stood at the entrance of the restaurant and looked at Sally, who was watching the two leave. "That's pretty good. At least the only thing left in each other's memories are smiles, right?" Sally shook her head before turning to Mag with a smile, and said, "Thank you, Mr. Mag, regardless of whether it was agreeing to let me stay, or taking care of me during this period of time, or keeping my secret, I have to thank you for everything." Meg looked into Sally's eyes and said with a smile, "I should be the one thanking you, Miss Sally. Thank you for working hard every day. Thank you for being Amy's mother today. Thank you for being friends with me all this time. You." Sally's eyes flashed with surprise. "How did you know?" "It was a coincidence." Meg shrugged. "Then should I thank you again?" Sally asked with a smile. "No, I should be the one thanking you for not killing me." Meg shook his head with a smile. He then pulled out an intricate music box from behind him. Within the transparent crystal cover was a half-elf girl in a purple dress. There was also a gold-threaded purse, which he handed to Sally. "What's this?" Sally's eyes lit up at the sight of the music box. She reached out to take it, and the half-elf girl was surprisingly Amy. Meg looked at Sally with a gentle expression and said, "The departure gift is the same as your salary for this month. The function buttons are the same as Amy's. The dances and songs that you've learned are also included. There are also some new songs and dances that you can slowly study. If you can't move them one day, take them out to dry in the sun. They'll be able to move again in half a day." Sally looked at Meg with reddened eyes. After a while, she said, "Thank you. Come back when you're free. It's my treat." Meg's smile was still warm and bright. Sally looked at Meg's smile in a daze. The first time she pushed open the door to Amy's, she was greeted with the same smile. "Okay." She nodded and put away the music box and the purse. She looked past Meg at the restaurant. This was the place where she had spent most of her time after she ran away from home. She had seen it grow from a sporadic customer to a bustling restaurant. She had experienced the excitement of trying to get on the charts, and also the danger of being attacked. It was a warm and cozy place like home. "Say goodbye to Amy for me." Sally retracted her gaze and looked at Meg again with a smile. "I think I'll be back. We'll all be waiting for you." Meg also smiled. "Goodbye." Sally turned and slowly walked away. "Goodbye," Meg said softly as he stood at the door until his thin figure completely disappeared into the night. What a terrible winter. Meg tightened his clothes and entered the restaurant. The door slowly closed behind him, and the moonlight shone down on the amber wine in the wine glass, making it appear particularly cold. He then took a sip. Meg calmly washed the wine glass and hung it back on the glass rack. He then turned off all of the lights as if nothing had happened, and made his way toward the stairs. As soon as Meg reached the staircase, Amy, who was sitting on the stairs with Ugly Duckling in her arms, asked in a quiet voice, "Father, is big sister Aisha not coming back?" Meg looked at Amy and made his way over to her with a smile. He patted her head gently, and said in a gentle voice, "She said she'll come back, but it might not be tomorrow." "Then what about the day after tomorrow?" Amy looked up at Meg. "Perhaps it'll be even later." Meg shook his head. He squatted down to look at Amy with a smile, and said, "Big sister Aisha said that she also likes you very much, so she'll definitely come back to see you." A smile reappeared on Amy's face, but it was quickly replaced by a dejected look as she said, "But I didn't tell big sister Aisha that I also like her very much." "She knows. She's an adult, and she knows that Amy also likes her very much." "Really? But I'm definitely going to tell her in person the next time we meet." On a tall mountain outside Chaos City, Elliot looked at Sally with a smile, and said, "Have you all bid farewell to each other?" Sally looked into the distance, and calmly replied, "You know that I'm not good at saying goodbyes." Elliot looked at Sally, and his lips moved. After a while, he said, "Sally, you must hate me very much, right?" Sally didn't reply to him. Instead, she continued to look into the distance with a calm expression, and asked, "Father, are we bandits?" "We're elves born from nature, and we're protected by the god of life. How could we be bandits?" Elliot's brows furrowed slightly. Sally turned to look into Elliot's eyes, and calmly asked, "But what we're doing now is no different from bandits." Elliot looked into Sally's eyes, and opened his mouth, but he didn't know how to respond. Chapter 940. You still can't do it. What is this thing? Old friend, can you still hold on? In the spacious cave, the branches and leaves of the tree of life had already turned yellow. The dark brown color had spread from the roots all the way up, and almost covered the entire tree trunk. There was no sign of life at all. Wisps of black smoke seeped out of the branches, carrying with them the terrifying aura of death. Irina sat with her legs crossed under the tree, and her face had become extremely pale due to the constant use of magic and mental strength. She looked up at the tree of life, and her face had become extremely pale. The branches of the tree of life swayed weakly, and gently swept over Irina's head. The cave entrance was glowing with a faint green light, and it seemed that it was about to open. "I'm not leaving. If even you are invaded by the aura of death, the elven race will be completely abandoned by the goddess of life, and we will fall into the endless abyss." Irina shook her head with a determined expression as she said, "I don't know when Mother will come out of seclusion. Before she comes out, I have to protect you and the wind forest." The branches of the tree of life swayed and emitted a whimpering sound as if they were crying. "Soon. Soon. Tonight, I will be able to obtain powerful energy, and the Norland continent will bow before my feet." Outside the cave, a full moon hung high in the sky. Borg looked in the direction of the cave with a crazed expression. Thin black lines crawled from his neck to his face, making his entire face appear extremely sinister. Black mist emanated from his body, and all kinds of ghostly faces appeared behind him. It was as if something was about to emerge from his body. "What's this?" Helena, who was looking at the stars in the starry cave abode, looked in the direction of the Tree of Life's cave with a bewildered expression. The stars embedded in the ceiling of the cave suddenly flickered, and it was as if a dark cloud had suddenly surged in, causing all the starlight to dim. Helena closed her eyes with a grave expression, and a huge crystal ball that was emitting purplish golden light slowly rose into the air. It started to spin rapidly in the cave, and the purplish golden light illuminated her face. "This is a very bad omen. The elven race is going to be doomed. It's even worse than the war among species." Helena's face turned pale, and her trembling voice echoed in the cave. Thick black clouds gathered from nowhere and pressed down on the sky above the wind forest. It was so heavy that it was hard to breathe. The elites of the elf tribe raised their heads to look at the heavy black clouds. Their faces were alert and their hearts were heavy. No one knew what was going on, but they were sure that the black clouds were abnormal and made them feel uncomfortable. "Come, God of Death, descend. I'm willing to be your servant and your spokesperson on the Norland continent." Borg raised his hands above his head with a crazed look on his face. A clap of thunder rang out, and a black lightning bolt shot out from the dark clouds, striking towards the Tree of Life in the cave. "Scram!" Irina roared. A beam of holy light shot out and collided with the black lightning. It exploded and was annihilated at the same time. Another clap of thunder sounded. Dense bolts of lightning flew out from the dark clouds and fell like raindrops. All of them were aimed at the Tree of Life. The silent Tree of Life suddenly lit up with a dazzling green light. Countless branches stood up and formed a round shield above Irina's head. Boom, boom, boom. Bolts of black lightning struck the round shield, and the branches were severed and charred black. The black patterns on the tree trunk seemed to have come alive, and began to spread toward the branches in a frenzy. The green light became dimmer and dimmer, but the round shield above Irina's head didn't budge at all. It didn't back down at all. "Old friend." Irina's eyes glistened with tears, but the magic caster's staff in her hand couldn't light up anymore. "Come on. Come on. This world is going to be mine." Borg's body was already trembling. His crimson eyes were like that of a demon's. A hideous evil spirit condensed behind him and looked at him with a covetous expression. "How dare these fellows interfere with my farming? Don't they know whose world this is? I'll spit a mouthful of salt soda water at them." A line of small words floated across Meg's mind. However, because the words were too small, Meg didn't notice them. At the same time, a torrential rain suddenly fell from the sky in the wind forest. SSSSS, heavy rain fell from the black clouds like a torrential downpour. Each raindrop was like a sharp arrow, easily piercing through the thick black clouds. It was also like sparks landing on a foam box. The evil dark clouds seemed to have met their scariest nemesis, and were instantly annihilated upon contact with the raindrops. The dark clouds were almost completely annihilated in the blink of an eye. What? Borg looked up at this scene with disbelief in his eyes. However, the black shadow behind him suddenly let out a shrill cry of fear. The raindrops landed on Borg's body, and it was like a ladle of water being poured into a pot of oil, making a sizzling sound. Borg raised his head and let out a shrill cry. The black patterns that had already crawled all over his face seemed to have been cut open by a knife, and then forcibly peeled off. The pain made him go crazy. The shadow behind him kept changing its form under the baptism of the rain, but it still couldn't avoid the rain. It was like a clay figure, and it kept shrinking under the washing of the rain until it completely disappeared. "This is..." Irina looked up in surprise. The black lightning that fell on the round shield suddenly disappeared, and what came next was a torrential downpour. The raindrops fell on the Tree of Life, and the black patterns that had already spread to the paper seemed to have met their scariest nemesis, and were instantly annihilated. Then, the tree trunk, which she and the Tree of Life hadn't been able to resist these days, was rapidly disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The withered branches of the Tree of Life began to recover their green color under the nourishment of the rain. The broken branches regrew, and the almost completely fallen leaves sprouted new buds. The light green light illuminated the cave, and the countless branches swayed slightly, glowing with vitality. This is the God of Life manifesting. Irina's eyes were also filled with surprise and joy at the sight of this. The branches of the Tree of Life swayed happily, and spots of green light gathered together and surged toward the weak Irina. The torrential rain gradually stopped. Borg knelt on the ground with a thud, and his body was covered in blood. He looked up at the sky, and shouted with indignation, "Why? Why? Just a little bit more, and my plan would have succeeded." Compared to my farming plan, a small matter like invading another world is nothing. A line of words floated across Meg's mind. Chapter 941. Ha! It's nothing. I just went to apply fertilizer and sprinkled some non-toxic pesticides. The system's voice sounded in Meg's mind. Meg raised an eyebrow and scrutinized it. Didn't you say that your ingredients are all natural? Why are you using fertilizer and pesticides? This makes me wonder if your ingredients really meet the supply standards and are worth the price. I saved your wife while applying fertilizer. You're not thanking me, but you're actually questioning the safety of my ingredients. You're simply unreasonable. A line of words smaller than an ant floated past, and the system said righteously, "Host, please don't question my professionalism in farming. No one is more professional than me in this matter, including Grandpa Yuan Longping. By the way, aren't you a gourmet system?" Meg asked with a complicated expression. Ha! I'm saying that even if it's just a side job, I can still do it to the best of my ability. The most professional. The best supplier of ingredients. Of course I'm a god of cookery system. But when it comes to planting vegetables, alright, you can shut up now. I'm not interested in farming. Meg cut off the system's words, and asked, "System, do you have any methods that can allow me to level up quickly? Like fighting monsters or something?" "I'm not interested in leveling up or fighting monsters either," the system said proudly. Meg's eyelids twitched as he resisted the urge to complain, and he asked, "Then system, how can I level up quickly through farming?" "Farming is farming. It has nothing to do with leveling up," the system replied calmly. "Meg, motherfucker. Host, please mind your manners," the system reminded. "Piss off." Meg rolled his eyes and ignored the system. He looked at Amy, who had fallen asleep with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and kissed her demon gently. Then, he tiptoed out of the room and went to the balcony. He took out his long sword and began to practice swordsmanship. The trip to Rodu and the Wind Forest made Meg realize the importance of power. In the face of absolute power, even the system couldn't do anything. Although Ozzy was very strong, it was obviously unrealistic to rely only on Ozzy when facing a truly powerful level 10 expert. Whether it was the Wizard Tower or the elves who had imprisoned Irina, they were not enemies that Z could deal with. He had to become stronger and return to Alex's peak strength. Only then would he be able to survive the upcoming chaotic times. Of course, it was not enough for him to be strong alone. He needed some helpers. A plan had already formed in his mind, but he wasn't sure if it could really be carried out successfully. The black heavy sword slashed out noiselessly in the darkness. It was as nimble as a spirit snake and as fast as lightning. After negotiating with the system, Meg added a silencing and anti-peeping barrier to the balcony. Although it cost Meg a lot of gold coins, it was very important for Meg to have a safe training ground now. An hour later, Meg, who was covered in sweat, stopped practicing. He put away his long sword and went downstairs to take a quick shower. Then, he lay down on the bed and got ready to sleep. Reminder: the delicious cuisine competition will start from tomorrow onwards. Host, please pay attention to the time. Just as Meg was about to fall asleep, the system's voice sounded. Meg opened his eyes immediately. He frowned and muttered to himself, "Looks like the eggplant with garlic sauce will be released tomorrow. The taste is still a little worse than the one I had last time. I haven't gotten anyone to try it yet, but it shouldn't be a big problem, right?" The next day, Meg woke up early in the morning. He made several servings of eggplant with garlic sauce in the kitchen. After tasting them one by one, he confirmed the final version. Although it was more delicious than most of the eggplant with garlic sauce he had eaten in his previous life, it was still a little worse than the eggplant with garlic sauce he had eaten in that tiny restaurant in his memory. There should be no problem with the recipe. Meg could only assume that the eggplant with garlic sauce had become more delicious because of time and memory. He couldn't find a way to improve it for the time being. Eggplant with garlic sauce. I hope you can shine in this different world. It's up to you whether I should dress up as a girl and dance to the Elysium. Meg threw all the eggplant with garlic sauce he had made into the kitchen waste bin and prepared to go out to the morning market to buy some eggplants. Knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. Phyllis is here so early. Meg untied his apron and hung it aside. He made his way to the door with a hint of surprise on his face. He had woken up an hour early today, so there was still some time before the appointment time that he had made with Phyllis. Phyllis. Meg's voice abruptly trailed off as soon as he opened the door. He looked at the two people, or to be more precise, two elves, standing at the entrance of the restaurant. A peculiar expression appeared on his face as he asked, Miss Shirley, Anna, why are you here so early? The person who had arrived wasn't Phyllis. Instead, it was Blower, or Shirley, who was holding Anna's hand. He was dressed in female clothing, and he was now an astonishingly beautiful crossdresser. He was most likely the most beautiful crossdresser that Meg had ever seen. No matter how he looked at him, he was completely flawless. No matter how he looked at him, he was a very natural and beautiful woman, including his voluptuous breasts. Meg wasn't sure what he had stuffed into his breasts, but there was no way that coconut shells and steamed buns could reach such a level of richness. However, silicone seemed to be a little too advanced. Could it be that a crossdresser had invented silicone in this world to make himself look more natural? Of course, none of that was important. What was important was that Meg wanted to know why Blower had brought Anna here so early in the morning. Could it be that Sally had left, so he had to leave as well? Good morning, Uncle Meg, Anna greeted with a smile as she looked at Meg. Blower looked at Meg with a reluctant expression and said, I'm here to take over her shift. She should have told you in advance, right? It was a pleasant female voice that was gentle but not seductive, and it was very suitable for his current disposition. Ha! Meg faltered upon hearing this. He felt as if he had misheard, and hesitated for a moment before asking, Who did you say you're here to take over her shift? Is there a second person who needs to take over her shift? Blower raised an eyebrow as he looked at Meg. Meg's eyes widened upon hearing this. He turned to Blower with a peculiar expression, and asked, Did Aisha ask you to come here? Did she ask you to take over her shift? I didn't want to be a waitress, but she's going to do something big, so I have to do a good job for her. Otherwise, I won't be able to live with myself. Blower nodded before heaving a forlorn sigh with a pained expression. With my beauty, I'm the most beautiful person in the world. It's such a waste of my beauty and youth to be reduced to a waitress. Anna, Meg repressed the urge to retort as he reappraised Shirley. He didn't think that Sally would find a successor for him before she left. As expected, she really was a considerate girl. In terms of looks, setting aside the fact that she was a crossdresser, Shirley was indeed one of those stunningly beautiful women. She was perfect for a waitress role. However, looks alone weren't enough. With the current workload in the restaurant, if she didn't have the ability to match her looks, then she would only be a vase in the restaurant. That wasn't what Meg needed. Mr. Meg, I know I'm very beautiful, but I really have no interest in men. Blower looked at Meg with a calm expression. I also have no interest in crossdressers. Meg grumbled internally. At the same time, he discovered that he had indeed lost his composure a little. He averted his gaze from Shirley's fake breasts, and turned to Blower with a smile as he said, I'm very grateful to Miss Shirley for coming to the restaurant at Aisha's request. However, if you want to work at Amy's, then I have to conduct some tests on you to ensure that you have the ability to take on this job. With my beauty, do I still need to undergo a test? That doesn't make sense. Blower was a little surprised to hear Meg's response. Beauty can be used to make a living, but Amy still needs a very capable waitress, Meg said with a smile. This guy's narcissism was truly speechless. I hate it when people say that I only have beauty. You can test me to whatever extent you want. Blower looked at Meg with a hint of fighting spirit in his eyes. Please come in. Meg pushed the door open to allow Blower and Anna in. After closing the door, Meg went into the kitchen and brought out a few bowls and plates of different shapes. He placed them on the table casually before pouring a spoonful of oil onto the bowls, plates, and table. He turned to Blower and said, "Young Mistress Shirley, please clean up these bowls and plates as well as the table in the shortest time possible. I really hate oil stains on my delicate hands, but if that's all, then it's too easy for me." Blower looked at the mess on the table with a nonchalant expression. He took 2 steps forward and waved a hand through the air, upon which all of the bowls and plates on the table fell onto a tray. A green light swept over the surface of the table, and all of the oil stains instantly melted away as if they had encountered their nemesis. A wave of water flowed over the table, and the greasy surface of the table was instantly rejuvenated. "Did you add a plant cleaner to this?" Meg gently ran his finger over the surface of the table, and couldn't detect any oil stains. There was also a faint fragrance of plants wafting through the air, and he was very pleased with the cleanliness level. Chapter 942. Is Little Ming a pig? Blower looked at Meg with furrowed brows. This is a very common and basic problem. If the customer is a glutton, then they'll eat even more. As such, it's very important to calculate the results as quickly as possible, Meg explained calmly. This was the beauty of arithmetic in practice. How many gold coins is 800 copper coins? 2 bowls of braised chicken and rice is 1. Blower's brows furrowed as he thought for a long while. He then turned to Meg and splayed his hands open as he said, "So be it, I give up. This is too difficult. This is not a problem that a normal elf can calculate." Right at this moment, Anna raised her little hand and said, "That's a total of 38 gold coins." Ha! Meg and Blower both turned to Anna in unison. "That's right, that's a total of 38 gold coins." Meg nodded with a smile as he looked at Anna. He didn't think that she would be so good at mental arithmetic, even though this wasn't a difficult problem. "No way. Anna, are you trying to embarrass me like this?" Blower's intricate eyebrows perked up slightly, and he suddenly felt a little embarrassed. A smile appeared on Anna's face as she turned to Meg with anticipation in her eyes, and said, "Uncle Meg, can I work at the restaurant as a cashier? Can Big Sister Shirley work as a waitress?" "Anna, you want to work as a cashier?" A hesitant look appeared on Meg's face. Anna was only 2 years older than Amy, and she was still in school. Asking her to work at the restaurant as a cashier would be akin to employing a child. Yes. I want to learn how to cook from Uncle Meg, and then help out at the restaurant. I still remember the multiplication table that Amy taught me last time, so I won't make a mistake in my calculations. Anna nodded before turning to Blower and whispering, "Also, if Big Sister Shirley works at the restaurant as a waitress, then I'll be alone in the embassy." Blower placed his hand on Anna's head as he looked at Meg and said, "I've already asked Chaos School. If Anna wants to enroll, she'll have to wait until next semester at the very least." A smile appeared on Meg's face. He squatted down and looked at Anna. "If that's the case, then we'll have to trouble our little friend Anna. However, as the restaurant's youngest employee, you'll still receive a salary and benefits." "I don't want money." I just want to learn how to cook from Uncle Meg. Anna shook her head. Blower raised an eyebrow and said, "How can you work for free, little guy? We have to take the money." That's right. Otherwise, I would become a black-hearted boss who exploits child laborers. Meg also nodded with a smile. He stood up and extended a hand toward Blower as he said, "Congratulations, young Mistress Shirley, you've been accepted." "Congratulations, Mr. Meg, you've accepted me." Blower extended a hand to shake Meg's hand, and both of them smiled at the same time. "Take a seat first. There's still some time before the opening hours. I'll go and prepare some suitable work clothes for you too. Looks like I can put away the recruitment notice I prepared yesterday." Meg placed the recruitment notice on the counter into the cupboard with a smile. He poured 2 cups of warm water for both of them before making his way upstairs. "I like to wear my own clothes." Blower looked at Meg's departing figure. "You have to wear work clothes when you're working," Meg replied without even turning around. After going through the women's clothing library provided by the system, Meg finally chose a modified version of Han Chinese clothing for Shirley. It was a waist-length dress with a plain white top and a long red skirt with golden embroidery on the sleeves. As for Anna, Meg chose a blue cotton dress with a small jacket for her. The weather was getting a little cold, so she had to wear more clothes. Ding! 3,000 copper coins have been successfully deducted. Customizing women's clothing. 3 minutes later. Ding! The goods have been delivered. Please accept them. Meg carried 2 sets of clothes downstairs and placed them in front of Shirley with a smile as he said, "These are your work clothes. The restaurant is severely short on manpower, so you'll have to start work this morning." Meg had already decided that when Blower put on women's clothing, he would treat him as Shirley. After discarding his preconceived notions, he would become a lot more natural around her. What a beautiful dress and jacket. "Thank you, Uncle Meg." Anna hugged her clothes as she looked at Meg with a sweet expression. "What's this?" Shirley looked at the Han Chinese clothing, and hesitated for a moment before reaching out to touch it. The material was smooth to the touch, so it should be made from the best silk. However, the clothes were separate from the dress, and one was red while the other was white. She found it very strange no matter how she looked at it. "Oh, right, this is the Han Chinese clothing. Even though it's an improved version, it's still a little complicated to put on." As for the clothes, Meg began to explain in detail how to put on the Han Chinese clothing. Even though it had been improved, it was still a little complicated for people who were experiencing it for the first time. "You can change into the clothes in the bathroom upstairs. I'm going to the market to buy some ingredients now. Make yourselves at home. If Amy wakes up and I'm not back yet, you can tell her that I'll make breakfast for you when I come back," Meg said to Shirley before pushing his bicycle out. "Big sister Shirley, do you want to change?" Anna asked Shirley with the clothes in her arms. "I." Shirley looked at the clothes on the table and hesitated for a moment before pursing her lips. "I'll just put it on casually. If it's too ugly, I won't wear it." 10 minutes later, Shirley, who had changed into the new clothes with some difficulty, looked at herself in the mirror with a look of disbelief. The white button-down top matched with the dark red waist-length dress. The strong contrast between the white and red made one's eyes light up. It was like a red plum blossom blooming in the snow, appearing exceptionally outstanding. It was neither charming nor charming, and it had a sense of pride. It was so compatible with her temperament that it was much better than the long dress she liked the most. The unique style and wonderful combination had achieved such an incredible effect in the end. It was really beyond her expectations. There were a few exquisite patterns on the collar and sleeves with gold thread. It was generous and exquisite, making the white clothes look even more stylish. What was even more amazing was that this set of clothes seemed to be tailor-made for her. It fit her so well that even the length of the sleeves was exactly the same. This is too good, isn't it? Looking at herself in the mirror, Shirley was silent for a long time before she couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Creak. Chapter 943. Shirley was stunned for a moment and almost jumped up. Her usually calm expression suddenly changed. She quickly waved her hands and said, "Little Amy, you can't say that. How could I have slept with him? But if you didn't sleep with him, then why are you changing in the bathroom? And it's not time for the restaurant to open yet. Father won't let customers in early, much less let others into the bathroom." Amy looked as if she had seen through everything. This. Shirley was stunned for a moment. Although the situation wasn't like that, why did it feel like there was a good reason? Amy. At this moment, Anna's voice came from the staircase. Anna, who had already changed into the blue Lolita dress, poked her head out from the staircase. Then, she ran up with a smile. When she saw Shirley in the bathroom, her eyes lit up. Her mouth opened slightly as she exclaimed, "Wow! Sister Shirley, you look so beautiful after changing into your work uniform." Work uniform? Amy looked at Anna with surprise and confusion. "Sister Anna, why are you in the restaurant too?" "Sister Shirley and I have already become employees of the restaurant. Our clothes are the work uniforms given to us by Uncle Meg," Anna said with a smile. Shirley regained her composure and nodded slightly. "That's right." Then, she looked at Anna gratefully. She didn't expect this little fellow to help her out. "So that's how it is." Amy looked at Shirley with a little disappointment. She thought to herself, "There's one less important piece of information that I can report to Sister Irina." However, Amy's expression quickly lit up again. She grabbed Anna's hand and said happily, "That's great. I can see Sister Anna every day from now on." "Yes, yes." Anna's face was also filled with a happy smile. "System, look at how cheap this fresh eggplant is. It's less than a copper coin per kilogram, and it's big in shape. You'd have to rely on genetic mutation to make eggplants this big on Earth, right? Such good stuff, I have to buy more." Meg thought to himself as he strolled around the market and looked at the eggplants that were as big as winter melons. "Host, you must be very curious. You've already done all the ingredients and procedures to the extreme, but you still can't make the eggplant with garlic sauce taste as good as you expected, right?" the system asked calmly. Meg stopped in his tracks and asked hesitantly, "Why? System, are you going to give me the complete recipe?" "No, the system is very pleased that the host has successfully researched the best recipe of eggplant with garlic sauce with his own efforts and research spirit. What you lack now is not skills, but the best eggplant. When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. If an eggplant is as big as a winter melon, it means that it can no longer be called an eggplant. An eggplant that cannot be placed on the grill is an eggplant that has lost its soul. The eggplants grown by this system are produced on the southern slope of Dragon Island's Fechuan Mountain. The sunlight is long and the intensity is high. The volcanic ash provides fertile soil and nutrients for the eggplants. It has the advantages of both long eggplants and round eggplants, perfectly retaining the flavor of eggplants on Earth. It's the best choice for eggplants with garlic sauce and grilled eggplants with spicy sauce. The system's voice sounded with the special passion of a salesperson. Meg frowned slightly, but still said calmly, "How much are your eggplants?" "Excellent eggplants are sold by the roots. The eggplants produced by the system are full of meat and nutritious." "How much is one eggplant? How heavy is one eggplant?" Meg interrupted calmly, 35 copper coins for one eggplant. One eggplant weighs about 400 grams. The price is clearly marked. No bargaining. The system said seriously. It's too expensive. I've researched this dish myself. You can't control what ingredients I use. I might as well buy the eggplants that cost 1 copper coin per kilo. There's not much difference in taste. Meg curled his lips and walked to the boss without any reluctance. Hey, hey, hey. Host, don't worry. We can still negotiate the price. You've indeed researched this dish yourself. But as a person who wants to become the god of cookery, how can you allow your food to have flaws when you can obviously do it to the best of your ability? The system suddenly became anxious. 30 copper coins for 1 eggplant. Not 1 more copper coin. At the same time, you have to give me the right to purchase other ingredients for the eggplant with garlic sauce. Meg's lips curled up slightly. Deal. The system gritted its teeth and said. Very good. Meg bypassed the vegetable stall owner who was full of smiles and walked straight to the entrance of the market. It was naturally the best to be able to get the ingredients provided by the system. The slight flaw in the taste really made Meg feel as if there was a fishbone stuck in his throat. Perfectionists were so pretentious. When he rode the bicycle back to the restaurant, Meg saw a few staff members of the Food Association adjusting the magic screen. It seemed that the new gourmet rankings was indeed going to be online. On the way back, Meg also met Phyllis. The child seat that he removed yesterday had not been installed yet, so Meg gave her a ride. Thank you, boss. It was the first time Phyllis was so close to a man. When she got off the bicycle, her face was flushed and she even stuttered a little. You're welcome. Meg opened the door with a smile. He picked up the bicycle and was about to go in. Miss Sally, has she left? Phyllis suddenly asked in a small voice. Meg stopped and turned to look at Phyllis. He nodded and said, yes, she went back last night. Okay. Phyllis bit her lip. Her eyes were slightly red. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. Meg patted her shoulder gently and carried the bicycle into the restaurant. Princess, are you okay? Phyllis stood at the entrance of the restaurant for a while. After she calmed down, she opened the door and went in. Phyllis. Shirley, who was holding a glass of water and drinking elegantly, almost spat out the water when she saw Phyllis come in. She choked and coughed until her face turned red. Phyllis, who had just come in, was also stunned when she saw such a beautiful elf and a little elf. The restaurant was not open yet. How did they come in? This is Big Sister Phyllis, also known as Big Sister Bean Sprout. She's in charge of cutting vegetables and slicing the duck. Her knife skills are very good. She's only slightly inferior to Father. Amy introduced Anna and Shirley to Phyllis. She then looked at Phyllis and said, Big Sister Bean Sprout, this is Big Sister Anna and Big Sister Shirley. From today onward, they will also be restaurant staff. Hello. Phyllis hurriedly nodded slightly. Hello, Big Sister Phyllis, Anna greeted obediently. Hello. Shirley nodded slightly and tried to appear as calm as possible. Although she knew what had happened in the Wind Forest, meeting Phyllis directly still surprised and frightened her. Chapter 944. Boss, Aisha is missing. She didn't return to the dormitory last night. When I didn't see her wake up this morning, I knocked on her door, but no one answered. I opened the door and went in, but she wasn't in the room. I searched the entire dormitory but couldn't find her. Now. What should we do now? Everyone was getting to know each other when Yabamiya opened the door in a panic and said anxiously. Barbara also pushed the door open and came in. Her hair was a little messy, as if she had just been dragged out of bed. Her face was also full of worry. Meg walked out of the kitchen and said to Mia and Barbara, Mia, Aisha didn't go missing. She went home. She only said goodbye to me last night and told me to tell you that if there's a chance in the future, she will come back to visit us again. She went home. That's good. Mia heaved a sigh of relief, but a hint of dejection quickly appeared on her face. Her eyes were slightly red as she said softly, but I haven't said goodbye to her yet. So what if she went home? It's pretty good. Barbara went forward and patted Mia's shoulder with a relaxed expression. However, there was still a hint of loneliness in her eyes. Meg looked at Mia with a smile and said gently, Aisha said that she didn't like to say goodbye, so she left quietly. I think she wants everyone to remember her smile. Mia looked up at Meg and nodded lightly. Meg continued with a smile, then let me introduce everyone to our new friends who just joined the restaurant today. Shirley and Anna, who everyone is already very familiar with. From today onwards, they are also members of Amy's. I hope that everyone can get along well at work and have a relaxed and happy life. I'm the cashier, Anna. Nice to meet you. Anna stepped forward and smiled sweetly. I'm Shirley. Shirley stepped forward and nodded slightly. Mia looked at Shirley, and her eyes lit up. She exclaimed in amazement, Wow! What a beautiful young lady. Is this the new outfit that boss prepared for Shirley? So beautiful, so compatible. Shirley was a regular customer of the restaurant. Apparently, she was young Master Blower's sibling, but the two of them always came to the restaurant together. However, beautiful people were always easy to remember, and Mia naturally still remembered her. Barbara also looked at Shirley in surprise. When she was in the Moon Nation, she felt that she was already pretty enough. After all, she was the eldest princess of the Moon Nation. Everyone who saw her would praise her. But after coming to this world, she found that there were many girls who were prettier than her in Amy's alone, not to mention the beauty she had seen among the customers during this period. Shirley's beauty was otherworldly, especially when she was wearing this special outfit. The contrast between white and crimson made one's eyes light up. In the Moon Nation, she would be regarded as a great beauty. But now, she was working as a waitress at Mamie's. It was really strange. Being a waiter here doesn't seem too bad, Shirley thought to herself with a smile on her face as she listened to everyone's praises. Little beauty Anna, are you still going to learn how to cook if you become a little cashier? Mia asked Anna with a smile. Anna had stayed in the restaurant for a while, and learned how to cook from Meg every day, so she was very familiar with everyone. I want to learn how to cook from Uncle Meg and become a chef as good as him. But I will also do my job well. Anna nodded with determination in her eyes. Everyone smiled knowingly when they heard that. This little fellow was very ambitious at such a young age. Phyllis couldn't help but take a few more glances at Anna. She didn't expect this little elf to also want to become a chef. Then, she would have a little companion to learn how to cook with. The melancholy of Sally's departure was quickly washed away by the new members and the process of familiarizing with each other. Shirley was a little narcissistic and a little misophobia, but there was nothing wrong with her personality. She quickly became familiar with everyone, but she was a little quiet. Today's new item, eggplant with garlic sauce. Available starting at noon. Meg wrote a line on the notice board, and then asked Mia to hang it outside the door. Eggplant with garlic sauce. Boss, is the new dish related to fish? Mia asked curiously. I like fish. Can we have fish this morning? Amy's eyes lit up, and she came up expectantly. You should eat something lighter in the morning, so you can only have it at noon. Meg shook his head with a smile. Although he also wanted to find someone to try the new dish first, eggplant with garlic sauce was still a little oily and heavy due to the way it was cooked. Obviously, it wasn't suitable to eat in the morning. Okay. Amy was a little disappointed, but she still nodded obediently. Okay, let's eat. Today is Shirley and Anna's first day at work. If there's anything they're not familiar with, please help them out. The busy opening hours are about to begin. Meg smiled and tapped Amy's nose as he said this to everyone. Breakfast was already laid out on the table. Yangzhou fried rice, rujiamo, and tofu pudding. It was simple and delicious, enough to provide energy for the whole morning. There's no need to worry about such a simple job. Shirley picked up the spoon with a relaxed expression and put a spoonful of fried rice into her mouth. The smile on her face grew brighter. She could eat this delicious fried rice and tofu pudding without having to wait in line. This job didn't seem to be as bad as she had imagined. The job at the restaurant seems simple, but it's much more complicated than you think. Meg didn't forget to give her a warning. Although she was a 7th-tier magic caster, some things couldn't be solved with magic. After breakfast, everyone cleared the table and prepared to officially open for business. Meg looked at Shirley and Anna with a smile, and said, Amy's principle is to provide comfortable service to our customers. We advocate mutual respect and treat every customer equally. No matter what race they are, whether they're rich or poor, as long as they're our customers, we'll treat them equally. Of course, Amy's also has its own bottom line. The service provided by the waiters doesn't include being bullied. As for those unreasonable customers, we can clear them out. You can refer to the precautions at the back of the menu for specific details. I like the last one, Shirley said as she picked up a menu and looked at it. What if someone refuses to pay? Anna asked meekly. Chapter 9:45. The customers soon found out about the change of service staff at Mamie's. The regulars had a good impression of Sally, who was serious in speech and manner, but swift and elegant in her actions. They were a little reluctant to see her leave. However, the new service staff, Shirley, also caused quite a commotion. After all, there was no other elf as beautiful as her in Chaos City. She had become a service staff member at Mamie's, and had taken over Sally's job. That was a little consolation. Mr. Mack, I'm really in awe of you. Can you tell me secretly where you hired your employees? I want to hire a secretary. Harrison went up to Meg and gave him a thumbs up. When it comes to hiring employees, I always leave it to fate. Meg smiled and turned to walk towards the kitchen. Was he going to say that Yabamiya was picked up from the streets, Barbara fell from the sky, Phyrus was brought back from the wind forest, and Shirley was recommended by Sally? That was too flirtatious. Even he was a little embarrassed to say it. Mr. Mack is good at everything, but he's too pretentious when he talks. Harrison sighed. He looked at the chattering in the restaurant, and was still very envious. Help me up. I want to see if Miss Shirley is still as heartless as before. She won't even see me. My lovesickness is killing me, a pale-faced Constantine said weakly in a luxurious horse-drawn carriage. Master, why do you have to do this? A middle-aged man who looked like a butler helped him up, and helplessly said, that Miss Shirley doesn't even know that you've been waiting for her at Mamie's every day. You can't blame her for being heartless. This is just one-sided love. She doesn't have any feelings for you. Constantine's expression froze. He turned to look at that butler, and said in a trembling voice, You. Bullshit. Although I've only met Miss Shirley twice, I've already decided that she's the only woman in my life. No matter what, I must find her and confess my love to her. Otherwise, I'd rather die. What if she refuses? The butler asked. Constantine's face turned red, and he said angrily, Nonsense. She. How could she possibly refuse? I love her wholeheartedly and wholeheartedly. I'm willing to give up my life for her. How could she reject me? This is absolutely impossible. She will definitely fall in love with me. Love isn't like that. The butler sighed. With an indifferent expression, he helped Constantine off the carriage. If I can't see Miss Shirley again, what's the point of living? I might as well die and turn into a butterfly to follow her. Then, I'll be able to see her every day. Constantine said with a sorrowful expression. He looked up and saw a woman in a white blouse and a red dress cleaning the dishes through the floor-to-ceiling window. Miss Shirley. Constantine's eyes lit up immediately, but he blinked again. He pulled the butler with joy and a little panic and said, "Did you see Miss Shirley? Am I hallucinating? Why is Miss Shirley working as a waitress at Mamie's?" The butler looked into the dining room and nodded. "If that beautiful elf lady is Miss Shirley, then you shouldn't be mistaken, master." "That's great. Let's go in quickly." Constantine was elated. He suddenly felt strength in his legs, and he was about to walk toward the entrance of the restaurant. "Master, calm down. This is Mamie's. You have to queue to enter." The butler quickly reached out to stop Constantine, and gestured with his mouth to indicate the long line at the side. Constantine glanced at the unfriendly customers in the line, and calmed down immediately. He almost forgot that this was Mamie's. If he cut the line, he might be blacklisted, and he wouldn't be able to enter the restaurant in the future. Although he didn't know why Shirley became a waitress at Mamie's, Constantine was very excited now. If this was true, then he would be able to see Miss Shirley every day in the future. That was too blissful. He walked all the way to the back of the line. Constantine, who was so weak that he couldn't stand up earlier, was now full of energy. He didn't even need the butler to support him anymore. His bloodshot eyes stared at Shirley, and his heart was as sweet as candy. Miss Shirley must still remember me, right? No, she must have missed me so much, just like me. Otherwise, with her beauty and status, why would she become a waitress? It must have been hard on her just to see me. That must be it. I didn't expect Miss Shirley to be such a thoughtful woman. I'm really touched. Today, I must confess my feelings to her and tell her that I love her too. Don't worry, Miss Shirley. I know all about your feelings for me, Constantine said. His face turned redder and redder, and even his breathing became heavier. The line moved forward slowly, and it was finally Constantine's turn. He tidied his clothes, took a deep breath, and tried to calm himself down. Then, he pulled open the restaurant door and hit his forehead with a thud. Ouch! Constantine held his swollen forehead, and he felt like there were stars in front of his eyes. The customers in the line outside covered their mouths and snickered. The customers in the restaurant stuck their heads out curiously, wanting to see which idiot hit the door like that. Are you here to smash the restaurant? Shirley also looked at Constantine, who was standing at the door, with some scrutiny. Other than agreeing to take over Sally's job, she also promised to protect the restaurant. She didn't expect to be needed so soon. Master, Miss Shirley is looking at you, the butler reminded him softly. Constantine straightened his body, and the pain disappeared instantly. The stars in front of his eyes also disappeared slowly. He blinked, and his eyes met the face that he had been thinking about day and night. Miss Shirley, I understand your feelings. I didn't expect you to miss me as much. I can feel your pain. Let me protect you, Constantine said as he took 2 steps forward and looked at Shirley with an infatuated expression. The restaurant was completely silent. Everyone was looking at the 2 people standing at the entrance of the restaurant, guessing what kind of relationship and grudges there were between the two. Many people's gossipy souls had already begun to burn. Chapter 946. Critical Hit. Constantine took 2 steps back and looked at Shirley in disbelief. His flushed face turned pale in an instant. If not for the butler supporting him in time, he might not even be able to stand properly. Miss Shirley doesn't remember me. How is that possible? I think of her every day. Doesn't she feel it at all? Did I feed all my love for her to the dogs? Constantine looked at Shirley with a pained expression. He looked like an aggrieved little wife who had been bullied. Shirley frowned. She really couldn't remember who this man who looked like he had a kidney deficiency was. Pfft. So it's just one-sided love and delusions. A young lady at the side burst out laughing. She thought it was a tragic drama, but it turned into a comedy. The customers who were watching the show also smiled knowingly. They didn't expect this beautiful elf lady to bring so much joy to everyone when she just became a waitress. This was probably the worst confession of the year, right? He didn't even reject it. He just admitted his mistake. Brother, aren't you afraid that she'll take out something bigger than you? In the kitchen, Meg glanced at Constantine and sighed in his heart. He pitied him. Shirley is really popular. Someone confessed on the first day of work, Yabamiya said softly with a smile. That uncle is too ugly, Barbara said with disdain as she glanced at Constantine. Shirley continued to clear the table. The plates landed on the tray lightly. She waved her hand gently on the table, and a green light swept across. A stream of water flowed over the table and chairs, and the table and chairs were as clean as new. Master, wake up. The most important thing now is to maintain your poise, the butler said calmly as he held Constantine's hand. Constantine's eyes gradually regained some life. He looked at Shirley, who was about to leave with the tray, and quickly forced a smile. Miss Shirley, I was just joking. We haven't seen each other for a long time. I didn't expect you to have forgotten me. Then, let me introduce myself again. I'm not interested. Shirley didn't even look at him. She turned around and walked towards the kitchen. Constantine's mouth was agape. He looked at Shirley's back view without any reluctance. His heart felt stifled. What a pitiful man. Actually, his looks are not bad. Isn't he our Chaos City's famous eligible bachelor, Constantine? He has more than 10 gem stores under him and is rich in wealth. He is a veteran in the field of love and has never failed. I didn't expect to be rejected here. You have to pay for what you've done. If the girls who were fooled by him back then knew that he would have a day like this, they would definitely laugh like crazy. The guests looked at Constantine and whispered among themselves. Some of the guests who knew Constantine began to reveal some of his past to satisfy their curiosity for gossip. Master, should we leave or stay? The housekeeper asked softly. He looked at Constantine worriedly. Although he didn't have high hopes for Constantine, he had watched him grow up. He couldn't bear to see him getting thinner day by day. Why are you leaving? I'll be wherever Miss Shirley is. Constantine plopped his butt on a chair at the side and laid his head on the table. He looked in the direction of the kitchen in a daze and said weakly, also, I'm starving to death. Hurry up and order me a Yangzhou fried rice and a braised chicken and rice. Master, are you finally going to eat? Constantine was elated. He quickly gestured for the waiter to come over and take his order. It doesn't matter if it's a temporary failure. As long as I continue to work hard, I believe Miss Shirley will be touched by my sincerity one day. I've already decided that she's the one for me. If I can't marry her, I'd rather be alone for the rest of my life, Constantine said with determination. Destined to be alone for the rest of your life. Then, Meg saw 3 big colored words appear above Constantine's head. System, you're a little naughty. Meg raised his eyebrows, and couldn't help but chuckle. The Yangzhou fried rice and braised chicken and rice were quickly served. Constantine, who hadn't had an appetite for food for a few days, had a great appetite. It didn't take long for him to finish the fried rice and braised chicken and rice. He was no longer listless, and his face was glowing again. Mr. Mac's food is not only delicious, but also invigorating. It's amazing, Constantine exclaimed in admiration. Constantine praised. He looked at Mag in the kitchen and thought to himself, you even helped me find young Mistress Shirley. When I get young Mistress Shirley, I will definitely give you a big red packet. Bill, Constantine said with a snap of his fingers. Anna walked over and looked at the plate in front of Constantine. She thought for a while, and said, a braised chicken and rice, a Yangzhou fried rice, and a savory tofu pudding. That's 16 gold coins in total. The extra is your tip. Keep the change. Constantine took out 2 dragon coins and handed them to Anna with a smile. He glanced at Shirley, and walked to the door without any hesitation. The biggest mistake in wooing a girl was pestering her. That would only make you seem worthless, and make the girl hate you. You wouldn't be able to get a girl like that, especially a beautiful girl. As a veteran in the field of love, Constantine, who had calmed down, started to return to his hunting instinct. He already knew how to capture this thorny rose. Good gentlemanly manners, coupled with a rich appearance, were the ultimate essentials for him to be undefeated in the field of love for many years. But Anna held the 2 dragon coins. Before she could finish her sentence, Constantine had already left. What a rude fellow. He didn't even listen to my Anna's words. Shirley looked at the back of the figure disappearing at the door with a hint of displeasure in her eyes. Sister Shirley, what's a tip? Why did he give me a tip? How should I deal with it? Anna asked Shirley in confusion. That fellow is probably too arrogant. You can ask Mr. Mac how to deal with it. Shirley gestured in the direction of the kitchen. Uncle Meg, that uncle spent a total of 16 gold coins, and then he left after giving me 2 dragon coins. He said the rest would be my tip. How should I deal with it? Anna asked Meg as she ran to the kitchen door. Chapter 947. The morning service passed by without any hiccups. Apart from the fact that it was Anna's first time collecting money, she didn't make any mistakes with Yabamiya and Bobla's help. Once she got used to it, she should be able to catch up to Sally's efficiency. Furthermore, with the division of labor, there was still room for improvement. Thank you for your hard work. Meg smiled as he looked at Shirley, who was slumped on the table without caring about her image after cleaning the entire restaurant. He placed a glass of warm water in front of her gently. I didn't expect such a simple task to be so tiring after repeated hundreds of times. This is not something an elf should do. Shirley looked at Meg through the transparent glass with a hint of resentment. Uncle Meg has to cook so many delicacies for all the customers alone. That's the most tiring, Anna said as she held the glass of water and shook her head. She looked at Meg with adoration. Good girl. Meg patted Anna's head with a smile. This little one's words were so warm that even he had the urge to give her a tip. Hee hee. Anna smiled obediently like a kitten. Shirley, who was slumped on the table, suddenly sat up. She looked at Meg warily, and then said with a relaxed expression, Is it tiring? I don't think so at all. This is a piece of cake for me. Big Sister Shirley is awesome too, Anna said with a smile as she turned to look at Shirley. Shouldn't I be awesome? Shirley said matter-of-factly, but she couldn't hide the smile in her eyes. Yes, Shirley's magic is also very powerful. The restaurant is as clean as Aisha's cleaning. Yabamiya agreed wholeheartedly. She looked at Shirley with envy. If only she knew magic, too. Meg said with a smile, it's free time from now until 11 p.m. You can arrange the time however you want. We'll have lunch around 11 p.m. If you want to have lunch, you have to come back earlier. Then I'm going to the ice cream shop. Anna, Shirley, do you want to come over and play for a while? Mia asked Shirley and Anna as she took off her apron. I want to learn how to cook with Sister Phyllis and Uncle Meg, so I won't go with Sister Mia. Anna shook her head. Shirley stood up, shook her head, and said, I'm going somewhere. I'm not going either. After everyone left, Meg began to instruct Phyllis and Anna. Phyllis continued to learn how to make beef kebabs. After a few days of practice, her beef kebabs were starting to look good, but they were still far from perfect. However, when it came to mixing sauces, she was extremely talented. She could perfectly mix all 3 flavors of sauces. In terms of control, she was indeed very talented. Anna, on the other hand, continued with the unfinished lessons. The little girl did not have any experience in cooking, so Meg asked her to start with knife skills. After she had a solid foundation in knife skills, she could start with other skills. Ding! Congratulations, host. As you have taken in 2 disciples, you have triggered the Good Teacher badge and obtained a chance to teach a disciple. After using it, the other party will enter the test field for the God of Cookery in their sleep and obtain a trial opportunity. At this moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded. Meg raised his eyebrows. Looking at the shiny badge in his mind, he said in surprise, System, what the hell is this Good Teacher? If other people also enter the test field, won't you be exposed? Don't worry, host. If the host does not take the initiative to mention it, no one will know about the existence of the test field for the God of Cookery. The person who is taught enters the test field for the God of Cookery, and when they wake up, they will only think that it is a dream, the system replied. That's good. Meg looked at Phyllis, who was putting aside the slightly charred beef kebab and putting another kebab on the grill, and said, Then I'll give this chance to Phyllis. With her current progress, she should be able to completely learn how to make beef kebab after entering the test field for the God of Cookery once. A golden light flew out from the badge and entered Phyllis's forehead. Teaching successful, the system's voice sounded. Meg saw that Phyllis and Anna did not seem to notice the golden light, so he was relieved. Then, he asked curiously, System, what's the use of this badge? As the God of Cookery, conquering the world with Chinese cuisine is not the end. Let Chinese cuisine take root and truly change the eating habits of the world, let more people fall in love with cooking and love life. This is the true meaning. The badge is a reward for the host's contribution to promoting food culture. After the host triggers 3 badges, the host will receive a special reward, the system replied. There's such a good thing. Then what should I do to trigger more badges? Meg's eyes lit up. He liked business with rewards the most. The host only needs to do his best to promote Chinese cuisine. The rest is up to fate. That's as good as not saying anything. Meg rolled his eyes. After ending the conversation with the system, Meg also had some new ideas in his mind. As the system said, if he was the only one in the world who could cook Chinese cuisine, although diners would flock to him like a flock of ducks, after 100 years, there would no longer be Peking duck and Laji Rujiamo in this world. How lonely that would be. Meg sighed silently. The feeling of being able to decide the height of food culture in the world was really cool. As for the matter of opening the menu, he was not stupid. How could he do such a stupid thing when he had not earned enough money? Meg was in a good mood. He made himself a cup of tea and leisurely oversaw the work on the side. At this time, there was a knock on the door. Meg opened the door with a teacup in his hand. Sheer, who was wearing a red windbreaker, was standing at the door with a balding middle-aged man who was wearing a pair of thick spectacles with a black briefcase under his armpit. He was wearing a pair of thick, large-framed glasses. "Mr. Meg, there's something I want to talk to you about. I wonder if you have time now." Hill looked at Meg and said with a smile. Meg's eyes stayed on the windbreaker on Hill for a while. Wasn't this the windbreaker he gave to Gloria? It seemed that Gloria had already started selling it. The style was very proper and the workmanship was very fine. When worn on Hill, it looked very neat and added a bit of momentum. "Of course, please come in." Meg stood aside with a smile and nodded slightly to the balding middle-aged man. Hill entered the restaurant and glanced at Phyllis and Anna in the kitchen. He then pointed to the man beside him and said, "Let me introduce you. This is Burrell, the chief engineer in charge of the steam locomotive project." "Hello, Mr. Meg. It's a pleasure to meet you. You are an admirable genius designer." Burrell stepped forward and shook Meg's hands with both hands. His eyes were full of admiration. "It's a pleasure to meet you too. Please sit down." Meg smiled and nodded. This uncle looked a bit like his university tutor. It was quite amiable. Chapter 948. So fast. Meg looked at Hill in shock. He had just handed the final blueprint to Hill before he went to Rodu, and it had only been half a month since then. Yet, Hill had already built the first steam locomotive, and even carried out the preliminary tests. This was simply godlike speed. "We hope to open up a route from Chaos City to Vic Mountain before the negotiations begin in 3 months' time, and complete the route. If there are no problems with the tests, the steam locomotive and the rails will enter the stage of mass production. The bank and the city lord's castle are very determined." Hill nodded with a smile. Meg pondered for a while. He looked at Hill, and shook his head slightly. "I'm afraid it's not an easy task to build a railway that's hundreds of kilometers long from nothing in 3 months. Just the construction of the rails is a huge project, not to mention the topography required to lay the rails. Although I acknowledge the ability of the city lord's castle and the financial power of Buffett Banks, I have to remind Miss Hill that the railway is a livelihood project. The safety and reliability of the railway concerns the lives of everyone on the train. You can't be too perfunctory just because you're in a rush." Although he didn't know much about politics, he roughly understood why Scheer was so anxious to complete the opening of a section of the railway before the negotiation of the peace agreement began. This was to increase the bargaining chip on the negotiation table between Chaos City and Buffett Banks. When it came to a financial group like Buffett Banks, the rise and fall of a country or a city wasn't enough to decide. However, stability and peace were the most important factors in the bank's business. Once the Norland continent descended into total chaos due to war, Buffett Banks wouldn't be far from collapsing. Chaos City was born after the war ended. If war resumed, it would be in a very awkward position, and might even become the target of public criticism. Although Chaos City's power had been increasing in the past 100 years, it was still just a city, and couldn't compete with the other races. Furthermore, Chaos City was founded on peace, so it naturally wouldn't want war to resume. To a large extent, the introduction of the steam locomotive was to calm the other races down and see the possibility of racial integration. However, Meg was still an engineering man at the end of the day. No matter what the capitalists and politicians thought, apart from transporting goods, the steam locomotive also bore the heavy responsibility of basic passenger transport. Safety was undoubtedly very important, and he could not afford to be careless. Burrell, who was at the side, looked at Mag with a serious expression, and said, "We all understand what Mr. Mag is saying. 3 months is the shortest time limit that our engineering department came up with after much deliberation and discussion. From the east of Chaos City to Vic Mountain, it was basically a flat area. Furthermore, the geology was stable, so the amount of work required to lay the tracks would be reduced significantly. Furthermore, we have recruited a large number of blacksmiths and fire mages from many races. We have also used a large number of magic tools and set up a large number of rail manufacturing points along the railway to ensure the quantity and quality of the rails. Blair took out a few blueprints from his bag as he spoke. There was a topographic map of Chaos City in the direction of Vic Mountain, a planning map of the manufacturing site, and some presets and solutions for problems that might be encountered during the laying of the railway tracks. Meg looked through those blueprints carefully, and only came to one conclusion in his heart: rich. He was more or less a rich second-generation heir in his previous life. He was not someone who had not seen the world, but with his father's capital, building a highway was already the limit. It was impossible for him to use so much manpower and material resources to build a railway on a barren plain in less than 3 months under the conditions of a completely backward heavy industry. Using fire mages and dwarven blacksmiths as coolies. To be so rich, other than the national wealth, Meg could not imagine that Buffett Banks, a financial group, would dare to play like this. If the hill was not out of her mind, then Buffett Banks' wealth was a little more exaggerated than he had imagined. That money network that covered the entire Norland continent had brought unimaginable wealth to Buffett Banks. Miss Hill, who was sitting opposite him with a smile, looked very normal, so it was obviously the latter. "Mr. Meg, please believe in our determination and attitude," Miss Hill said to Meg with a smile. "Seems like Miss Hill really values this steam locomotive project," Meg said with a complicated expression as he handed the blueprints back to Blair. Miss Hill was taking a big gamble. If she lost, Buffett Banks might be dragged into the abyss. This was not building a car. "I believe that Mr. Meg's outstanding creation will bring great changes to this world," Miss Hill said with a smile as she looked deeply at Meg. Meg looked away with a smile, and said, "Miss Hill, when would you like me to visit the completed locomotive?" "If it's convenient for Mr. Meg, you can go now," Miss Hill said. Meg glanced at the clock on the wall, and shook his head. "It might not be convenient now. I have to prepare for the noon business soon. If it's possible, I can go over at 1:00 in the afternoon. Mr. Meg is really a good boss. I will send someone to pick you up at 1:00 in the afternoon." Miss Hill stood up and nodded at Meg with a smile before turning to walk to the door. "Goodbye, Mr. Meg." Blair put away the blueprints and shook Meg's hand before quickly catching up with Miss Hill. Technology can indeed speed up when it meets a huge amount of money. Meg looked at Miss Hill's back and sighed silently. With Miss Hill's push, this world would enter the age of steam soon. Meg was not sure whether this was good or bad. After all, this was a world of swords and magic. The experience on Earth was not applicable. However, one thing was for sure. If the railway to Vic Mountain was really completed in 3 months, it would definitely have a certain impact on the upcoming peace talks. As one of the leaders, Buffett Bank would also be tied to Chaos City, and would have the opportunity to stand on the negotiation table with all the races. Satisfy all the requests from the engineering department. Is there a conclusion to the negotiation between the city lord's castle and the goblins? Miss Hill asked the secretary sitting opposite her after she got on the horse-drawn carriage. "The news just came back. The negotiation has basically been finalized. Due to the possible turmoil and the long-standing wish of the elves and the forest trolls, the goblins are willing to form an alliance with Chaos City. They will also open up the various underground mineral resources to us and Chaos City," the secretary said with a nod. "Very good." Miss Hill nodded. She lifted a corner of the curtain and glanced at Amy's. "Come and fetch Mr. Meg to the construction site at 1:00 in the afternoon." Chapter 949. Derek was one of the senior reviewers of Rodu's Gourmet magazine, and was also recognized as the #1 vegetarian reviewer in the culinary world. As a vegetarian, Derek focused on vegetarian reviews, and was the favorite reviewer of vegetarians. He was an expert in this field. At Robert's invitation, he specially came to Chaos City from Rodu to do a vegetarian review and ranking for the completely revised Delicious Cuisine rankings. Derek had lived in Chaos City for a period of time when he was young, and was friends with Old Laurie despite their age difference. It could be said that he was influenced by Old Laurie when he was young, and that was why he embarked on the path of being a food reviewer. When Old Laurie created the Delicious Cuisine rankings, he had also participated in it for a period of time, so he had some feelings for it. It was also because of this that he agreed without much thought when Robert approached him this time. However, he didn't have high expectations before coming over. Chaos City's culinary atmosphere was very different from Rodu's because it lacked a strong foundation and innovative chefs. Although he hadn't been to Chaos City for close to 20 years, he had tried a few restaurants according to the Food Association's list this morning. Just as he expected, there weren't any vegetarian dishes that could make his eyes light up. There were also many restaurants that had meat as their signature dishes, but their attitude towards vegetarian dishes was almost perfunctory. This made his meal a little unpleasant. Fortunately, he promised Robert that he would only do one review before returning to Rodu. He probably wouldn't return to Chaos City again. Amy's was the 6th restaurant he chose because there was a small line of words at the back. This restaurant has a lot of customers. It's best for reviewers to line up in advance to avoid wasting too much time in the queue. Hence, he brought this restaurant that was at the back of the queue to the front. He wanted to see what kind of restaurant it was that the Food Association would specially write a reminder. The restaurant opened at 11:30 a.m., and he arrived at 11 a.m. To his surprise, there were already customers lining up spontaneously at the restaurant's entrance. There were over 20 people in 2 lines. This indeed surprised Derek. There were a few popular restaurants in Rodu, and there were indeed customers who would line up in advance. However, those were all very famous restaurants with excellent reputations and capabilities, but there were only 3 to 5 such restaurants. He didn't expect this restaurant in the most remote corner of Chaos City to be so popular. Furthermore, as time passed, more and more customers lined up behind him. Before the doors even opened, the line had already reached the plaza. There were at least 300 to 400 people. What made him feel even more curious was that these 2 lines didn't seem to be arranged randomly. Instead, they seemed to be divided into gangs. Because of something called tofu pudding, they were arguing until their faces turned red, and they were on the verge of fighting. I didn't expect this restaurant to be so popular. I just don't know what the main dish of this restaurant is, and if they will put an effort to cook vegetarian dishes. Derek thought to himself curiously. As a vegetarian, he had not touched any meat dishes for more than 20 years. Young man, this is my first time here. Are there any vegetarian dishes worth recommending? Derek asked the young man beside him. Vegetarian? The young man thought for a while and hesitated. I'm not sure if the sweet tofu pudding is a vegetarian dish, but the savory tofu pudding is definitely a vegetarian dish. Uncle, if this is your first time here, then you're in the wrong line. The savory tofu pudding is the right choice for you. Uncle, don't be fooled by him. Tofu pudding should be eaten sweet. Only sweet tofu pudding can be called a vegetarian dish. The savory tofu pudding is heresy. The young lady standing behind Derek said indignantly. She even glared at the young man after that. Savory and sweet tofu pudding. Derek pondered. So, the tofu pudding that they had been arguing about for a long time was actually a dish, and the reason for their argument was actually just the taste. Derek felt a little embarrassed as he watched the young man and young lady arguing. He quickly said, in that case, I'll order 1 serving of each flavor. You don't have to argue. Uncle, you're dreaming. The young lady rolled her eyes. Mr. Mac has made a rule that each person can only order one serving of tofu pudding. Uncle, if you want to eat it, you have to choose a flavor. Everyone wants to have another bowl of tofu pudding. Also, they provide 200 servings of tofu pudding for every meal. If you come late, you won't be able to eat it, the young man explained. There's such a rule. Derek raised his eyebrows in surprise. However, when he looked at the long line behind him, he understood. There were so many customers. If they didn't limit the amount of food they could buy, the customers at the back would probably have queued for nothing. Actually, this tofu pudding can't be considered a vegetarian dish. It can only be considered a snack. Uncle, if you want to eat vegetarian dishes, you might not be full at Mamie's. Even the Yangzhou fried rice has eggs in it. You might not be able to accept stinky tofu. Besides, that's also considered a snack, the young lady said. Is that so? Derek was a little disappointed. It seemed that this was also a restaurant that focused on meat. Mr. Mac has a new dish today. Maybe it's a vegetarian dish, the young man consoled him. Didn't you see what's written on the signboard? Today's dish is eggplant with garlic sauce. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't look like a vegetarian dish, right? The young lady immediately poured cold water on him. This. The young man pondered for a while and scratched his head. It really doesn't look like a vegetarian dish. It's okay. I'll just try the tofu pudding, Derek said with a smile. He had waited in line for so long, but he didn't even get to try a vegetarian dish. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't disappointed. However, the tofu pudding that so many customers were arguing over had to have something special. The restaurant was about to open for business, so it wouldn't hurt to try it before moving on to the next restaurant. It's amazing. It's just eggplant. There's no fish in it at all, but why does it emit a fishy aroma? It's so delicious. Yabamiya couldn't help but exclaim after taking a bite of the eggplant with garlic sauce. The others also looked at the half-eaten eggplant with garlic sauce in amazement. The eggplant was cut into the shape of a fish, and then a scale-like incision was made on the back of the eggplant with garlic sauce. It was a combination of sweet, sour, salty, and spicy. Father, I want another bowl of rice. The eggplant with garlic sauce is too delicious. Amy showed her empty bowl and stuck out her tongue to lick a drop of sauce from the corner of her mouth. She smacked her lips and revealed a sweet smile. Okay. Meg took the bowl with a smile and got up to get more rice. There was probably nothing in the world that would make him happier than Amy giving him another bowl of rice. Chapter 950. Lunch ended with everyone ordering another bowl. The sour, sweet, salty, and spicy eggplant with garlic sauce was well received by everyone. Meg was naturally very satisfied with this. This was the first dish that he had truly learned on his own. The sense of accomplishment was indescribable. Welcome to Mamie's. Meg opened the restaurant's door and smiled at the customers lining up at the entrance. The customers entered the restaurant one after another, greeted Meg, and chose their favorite seats. Mr. Mac, is this new dish, eggplant with garlic sauce, made with fish? Harrison asked Meg curiously as he entered. Many customers looked at Meg curiously. Every time a new dish was released, it was the most interesting moment. No, this is a vegetarian dish. Meg shook his head with a smile. He did not pretend to be mysterious. It's a vegetarian dish. Is it really made with eggplant? Oh. Eggplant is the food that I hate the most. It's so soft, it's so scary. I hate the taste of eggplant too, but my neighbor loves it. He always asks me to eat at his place. Then your neighbor must be a forest troll. You even know that. The customers started discussing when they heard that. However, most of them did not have a good impression of eggplant. Vegetarian dish. Eggplant. Derek, who had just sat down, looked at Meg and could not help but feel curious. Eggplant was also one of the foods that he hated. Whether it was the terrible texture or the smell that was difficult to get rid of, it was enough to make him stay away. However, this restaurant owner said that this was a vegetarian dish, and it could be the only vegetarian dish in this restaurant. Since they were here, regardless of their preferences, it was basic professional etiquette to try it. Meg did not explain further. It was not strange that people did not like eggplant. Those who liked it would naturally enjoy it. He returned to the kitchen with a smile. Of course, the main reason was that they had not tried eggplant with garlic sauce yet. Otherwise, they would definitely fall in love with eggplant. The customers began to order. Due to their resistance to the taste of eggplant, not many customers chose to order eggplant with garlic sauce. Of course, more customers were hesitating between ordering and not ordering, waiting for the real warriors to try it first. Derek looked around the restaurant, and his first impression was that it was comfortable. Whether it was the lighting in the restaurant, the decorations of the tables and chairs, or the dense green plants hanging on the railings, everything made him feel comfortable and relaxed. After careful observation, he could feel the cleanliness of the dining hall. There was not a single speck of dust. Even the cracks of the tables, which were difficult to clean, did not have the slightest bit of dirt. There should be a professional mage who cleaned the place to achieve such a level of cleanliness. However, what made him a little uncomfortable was the fact that he was sharing a table. He looked at the orc sitting opposite him and the wolf-headed devil sitting beside him. His face was a little guarded, and he felt a little nervous. Having lived in Chaos City for a period of time, he naturally knew that Chaos City was a city where many races lived together. However, he was used to living in Rodu, so he was more or less guarded against other races. Furthermore, sitting at the same table with a devil and an orc was an experience he had never had before, so he felt a little uncomfortable. Even the most basic racial segregation is not done. The restaurant's dining environment can only be rated 1 star at most. Sitting at the same table with an orc and a devil, even if there are delicacies in front of me, I won't be able to enjoy it wholeheartedly, Derek thought to himself. His anticipation for the eggplant with garlic sauce was completely gone. He just wanted to taste it and leave immediately. "Sir, what do you want to order?" Yabamiya came to Derek with a smile. "Give me a moment. Let me see." Derek took the menu and flipped it open. All the delicacies with pictures on them came into view. Even a vegetarian like him could not help but salivate when he saw those colorful dishes. However, his gaze quickly skipped over the meat dishes, and landed on the snack section. The sweet tofu pudding and the savory tofu pudding were different. The porcelain bowl was filled with white tofu pudding, while the savory tofu pudding was covered with some small side dishes. Meanwhile, the sweet tofu pudding should have been drizzled with golden red syrup. They all looked very tempting. After hesitating for a while, Derek still chose the sweet tofu pudding. Then, he flipped the menu to a page, and looked at the only dish in the vegetarian section, eggplant with garlic sauce. In the picture, there were 2 fish on a long plate. The golden red syrup was drizzled over them. No matter how one looked at it, they looked like 2 fish. There was no eggplant at all. The price of a serving was 400 copper coins. At the same time, it was stated that a bowl of rice was 50 copper coins. Refills were not allowed. Derek stared at the picture for a while before looking up at Yabamiya. "Are you sure this is a vegetarian dish?" "Yes, this is a vegetarian dish. There are no meat dishes." Yabamiya nodded. No customer had ordered the eggplant with garlic sauce before. She almost couldn't help but tell them how delicious the eggplant with garlic sauce was. It would be a pity to miss it. She wondered if this customer would be the first to order the eggplant with garlic sauce. After receiving Yabamiya's confirmation, Derek closed the menu and said, "I'd like a sweet tofu pudding, a eggplant with garlic sauce, and a bowl of rice." "Okay, please wait a moment." Yabamiya's eyes lit up. Finally, a customer ordered the eggplant with garlic sauce. According to past experience, this meant that other customers would follow suit soon. "Wow, bro, you even eat eggplant. You're a scary person." The werewolf sitting beside him looked at Derek in horror. "You're a true warrior." The orc sitting opposite him also gave him a thumbs up. "I'm curious if Mr. Mac's eggplant will become another delicacy." "Bro, I'll rely on you to test the poison," the young man sitting diagonally across from him said with a smile. "Okay." Derek nodded his head awkwardly. The two demons and orcs were different from the ferocious image he had in mind. Instead, he could feel the friendliness they exuded. He didn't expect to become a warrior just by ordering eggplant with garlic sauce. "Boss, a customer ordered the eggplant with garlic sauce," Yabamiya said excitedly as she returned to the kitchen. "Roger that." Meg nodded. He took an eggplant from the shelf at the side. It was longer than a normal eggplant, but shorter and fatter than a long eggplant. He cut it in half like a fish that was cut in half. He flipped the kitchen knife in his hand, and a thin layer of eggplant skin was peeled off. Between the movements of the knife, the two slices of eggplant became fish. The crisscrossing knife cut thin scales on the eggplant and went deep into the eggplant, but didn't sever it. 2 pots were heated at the same time. After half of the oil was heated, he placed the eggplant into the pot with the most oil and fried it. In the other pot, he added some oil, minced garlic, ginger, pickled pepper, and a spoonful of the secret bean paste. After stir-frying, he added the red oil. He then added sugar, vinegar, and a small amount of starch to make the fish sauce. The eggplant that was fried until its skin was slightly golden was placed on a plate. The boiling hot and thick fish sauce was poured over the eggplant. Sizzle. There was a soft sound. A serving of eggplant with garlic sauce that was sour, sweet, salty, and spicy with all flavors was ready. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, Wonderful Book mobile version website, .com. Chapter 951. Your eggplant with garlic sauce and rice. Yabamiya walked over and placed the freshly cooked eggplant with garlic sauce and a bowl of rice in front of Derek with a smile. Everyone's gaze landed on Derek and the eggplant with garlic sauce in front of him. However, Derek's gaze was completely attracted by the eggplant with garlic sauce in front of him. The freshly cooked eggplant with garlic sauce was still emitting steam, and the rich aroma wafted over together with the steam. It was a very special aroma. It was a little like the aroma of the fish from the Green Carp restaurant in Rodu. That was the most famous restaurant in Rodu for eating fish. He liked the stir-fried lotus root slices there, so he often went there to try it. Naturally, he was no stranger to the aroma. It wasn't accurate to say that it was the aroma of the fish. It should be said that it was the aroma of the spices and side dishes cooked together with the fish. Furthermore, compared to the aroma of the fish from the Green Carp restaurant, this aroma was even more alluring. Even his picky nose couldn't detect any fishy smell. Just the aroma alone was enough to make him salivate. On the long plate, there was a fish that had been split in the middle. The golden red sauce covered the fish, and the translucent red color had seeped into the meat of the fish perfectly. However, when Derek took a closer look, he realized that it wasn't fish on the plate, but eggplant that had been cut into the shape of a fish. As the eggplant was peeled and cut with a knife, it was slightly golden yellow after being fried. It looked just like a real fish. Derek's eyes lit up. He was a little surprised and puzzled as he thought, what a strange cooking method. Furthermore, I really don't see any fish. Then, where did this rich aroma come from? Could it be that fish soup is used? If fish soup is used, it shouldn't be placed in the vegetarian section, right? It smells so good. It looks just like a real fish, and the aroma is even more fragrant than a real fish. Is this really the smell of an eggplant? Bro, quick, try it. I want to have one too. The three people at the same table were already swallowing their saliva. The young man couldn't help but urge. Since we've already ordered it, let's have a taste. Derek hesitated for a moment, but still picked up his chopsticks and picked up the eggplant. The eggplant was softer than he had imagined. The golden red fish sauce seeped into the eggplant perfectly. It didn't have the usual unappetizing white color of the eggplant. It was slightly oily, and even Derek couldn't help but swallow his saliva. I hope it wasn't cooked with fish soup. Otherwise, I'll definitely give a 0 rating, Derek thought before putting the eggplant into his mouth. This taste. Derek's eyes lit up instantly. Sour, spicy, sweet, and salty flavors exploded in his mouth at the same time. He had never experienced such an impact in his 20 years of eating vegetarian food. His usually calm taste buds were stimulated in an instant. It was like a dormant volcano suddenly erupting with lava, stimulating his tongue crazily. Every taste was so prominent, but when they blended together, it was so harmonious that one couldn't help but indulge in it. The soft eggplant almost melted in his mouth. His taste buds experienced a crazy feast of taste. He swallowed it gently, and the lingering fragrance lingered in his mouth. Unbelievable. Is this really an eggplant? How did the food that I didn't like become so delicious? Derek exclaimed as he savored the lingering fragrance in his mouth. What shocked him even more was that this eggplant with garlic sauce didn't contain any fish-related ingredients. Even the sauce didn't contain any fish soup. Yet, such a pure vegetarian dish was so delicious that even meat dishes couldn't compare to it. Only one bite. Derek had completely forgotten about this. He picked up the bowl in front of him and took a bite of rice. The rice tasted sweeter and sweeter with the lingering fragrance in his mouth. One bite of eggplant with garlic sauce, one bite of rice. It was so delicious that he couldn't stop eating. How can there be such a delicious vegetarian dish in this world? This completely overturns my definition of a vegetarian dish. It's supposed to be a vegetarian dish that cleanses one's heart of desires. How can it make one so greedy that they can't bear to part with their chopsticks? Oh. It's really too delicious. Derek was struggling in his heart, but in the end, he chose to give up. Give me another bowl of rice, please. Derek put down the empty bowl in his hand and looked at Yabamiya. Gulp. Everyone around them swallowed their saliva. Mr. Mac is a pervert. Don't tell me he really made eggplant into a delicacy. Looking at this bro's performance, it's highly possible. Mr. Mac is still the Mr. Mac. There's nothing in this world that Mr. Mac can't make into a delicacy. Miss Mia, give me a helping of eggplant with garlic sauce, please. The customers couldn't sit still anymore. Those who were hesitant at first started to order. Watching a mukbang broadcast was more tempting than any slogan. Alright, please wait a moment. Yabamiya took Derek's bowl of rice with a smile. At the same time, she took the new orders one by one and walked to the kitchen with light footsteps. As expected, once someone tried it, other customers would order the eggplant with garlic sauce very quickly, and it would receive good reviews as usual. Derek got his second bowl of rice very quickly, and finished it with the remaining eggplant with garlic sauce. In the end, he even picked up a bit of garlic from the plate, and mixed it with the last mouthful of rice. "Delicacies are indeed the most satisfying," Derek said with satisfaction. As he put down the bowl and chopsticks. He hadn't experienced such satisfaction in a long time. "I didn't expect to be able to eat such delicious vegetarian dishes in Chaos City. Seems like I'm too narrow-minded." Derek couldn't help but think self-deprecatingly when he thought of his previous judgment. Even he had never tasted such delicious vegetarian dishes before. Stunning wasn't enough to describe it. It was a taste that made him want to eat more. "Here's your sweet tofu pudding. Please enjoy." At this moment, Yabamiya came over with a bowl of sweet tofu pudding, and placed it gently in front of Derek. "Thank you." Derek, who was in a good mood, nodded with a smile. Then, he sized up the tofu pudding that the customers were arguing about. The golden red sticky syrup was poured over the white tofu pudding, and the faint fragrance of beans and sweet sugar wafted into his nose. "Dessert after the meal. Seems good." Derek picked up the spoon and scooped up a spoonful of tofu pudding. It was a little like egg custard, and the snow-white cut was quickly covered by the syrup. It swayed slightly in the spoon, and was as exquisite as a piece of art. The sweet and tender tofu pudding melted in his mouth. The syrup wrapped around it was so rich, and the sweetness blended perfectly with the tofu pudding. After swallowing a mouthful of tofu pudding, he didn't feel the sweetness at all. There was a faint tofu pudding taste left in his mouth. It was sweet but not greasy, and he couldn't help but take another spoonful. "This boss must be a genius," Derek complimented in his heart as he enjoyed the delicious tofu pudding. 10 minutes later, Derek paid the bill and walked out of Mamie's. 5-star. "Do I have any other choice?" Derek turned back to look at Mamie's, and touched his stomach with satisfaction. "Let's call it a day for lunch. I don't want to try the next restaurant anymore. Please remember the domain name of this book. .com, wonderful book mobile version website. .com. Chapter 952. Translator, Henny Translations Editor, Henny Translations. My dear sister, you've put on such a good amount of weight. Page 1/1, the introduction of eggplant with garlic sauce had greatly boosted the sales of rice, so it was inevitable that more rice would be added. Otherwise, no one would be willing to leave the remaining half of the eggplant with garlic sauce. "I can't take it anymore. From tomorrow onwards, I'll only order a sweet tofu pudding when I come to Mamie's. I've already gained 5 kilograms this month. I've gained weight too. But my husband doesn't mind. Instead, he said, it feels better." "Forget it. I heard you say that last month. But my dear sister, you've put on such a good amount of weight. Of course it feels good. Even I want to touch it. I'm so jealous." A few noble women walked out of the restaurant, chatting and joking with each other. Their faces were full of satisfaction. The restaurant's opening hours were over. Yabamiya flipped the wooden sign over the door, closed the door, and heaved a long sigh of relief. Everyone in the restaurant heaved sighs of relief almost at the same time. After the restaurant had doubled in size, the intensity of work had more than doubled. After more than an hour, the fatigue was too strong. "Thank you for your hard work, everyone. I have to go out for a while. I'll leave the rest of the work to you." Meg came out of the kitchen, took off his apron, and hung it at the side. He went upstairs to change into casual clothes, and then went downstairs to walk out the door. There was already a horse-drawn carriage with the Buffett family emblem parked at the door. A middle-aged man who looked like a secretary was standing in front of the carriage. When he saw Meg coming out, he went up to him with a smile. "Mr. Meg, Miss Hill asked me to pick you up." "All right." Meg nodded slightly. This was one of Miss Hill's personal secretaries. He had met him before. Meg got into the horse-drawn carriage, and the secretary sat across from him with a smile. However, he didn't initiate a conversation with him. Meg didn't ask too many questions, either. The steam locomotive was supposed to be a highly confidential matter. He wasn't sure if this secretary had the authority to know about it. The horse-drawn carriage moved forward steadily, and exited Chaos City from the East City Gate. After driving along the main road for a while, it entered a side path and continued on its way. Meg wasn't too surprised by this. Building a train was a massive undertaking, so it naturally couldn't be carried out in Chaos City. Otherwise, the entire Norland continent would know about it by the next day. Furthermore, Mr. Hills said that the first section of the railway was going to Vic Mountain. That meant that Buffett Bank and Chaos City had already reached an agreement with the goblins, so it wasn't strange for them to build a base in the east of the city. The unicorn's speed was very fast, but it still took about half an hour before it stopped in front of a large mountain. "Mr. Meg, we're here." The secretary stood up and got out of the carriage. Meg lifted a corner of the carriage's curtain and glanced at the seemingly ordinary stone wall. His eyes narrowed slightly as he could feel a faint aura of magic coming from the stone wall. Some kind of magic array should have been used to conceal the entrance. However, Meg's face didn't show the slightest bit of abnormality. Lowering the curtain, he got up and followed out of the carriage. Looking at the stone wall with a face of surprise, he said, "Here?" "Yes." The secretary nodded with a smile. He took out a black token from his pocket, and pressed it directly on the stone wall. A golden ripple appeared on the stone wall that looked like an ordinary stone. With a twist of space, a whirlpool that could accommodate one person appeared on the stone wall. "Mr. Meg, please come in," the secretary said to Meg with a smile. Meg hesitated for a moment, and walked straight in. After a short moment of darkness, the light became bright all of a sudden. Meg squinted slightly. After adjusting to the light, he looked around, and his eyes lit up immediately. This was a large passage that was over 10 meters wide and close to 20 meters high. 2 parallel tracks were laid on the ground, extending all the way in. There seemed to be an even bigger space inside. Above his head, the light from the magic array illuminated the passage. Meg felt as if he had come to a giant's cave. Soon, Meg felt a few senses sweep over his body. If he wasn't mistaken, they were at least the mental senses of magicians above the 9th level. There was even a 10th level magician among them. Sure enough, it's a big deal. Meg secretly praised in his heart. To be able to let a great magician guard the base here, the importance that Buffett Banks and the City Lord's office attached to the steam locomotive could be imagined. "Mr. Meg, please come with me. Miss Hill and the City Lord are already waiting in front." The secretary looked at Meg and smiled. "Lord Michael is also here." Meg was a little surprised. "Yes." The secretary nodded, but didn't explain much. Meg followed the secretary into the depths of the cave. As they went deeper, the sound of metal hitting metal gradually increased. After about 5 minutes of walking, a huge karst cave appeared in front of Meg. Crisscrossing tracks filled the karst cave. The dwarven blacksmith's heavy hammers smashed a string of sparks on the iron blocks. The magicians cast magic to melt the iron into molten iron, extract the iron, and then mold it into the required shape. The work was in full swing. On the centermost hanging platform, a 4-section steam locomotive displayed its extraordinary iron bones. It was a steam locomotive that was about twice as wide as an ordinary train. "It looks like it." Meg stopped and looked up at the steam locomotive with its chimney pointing to the sky, revealing a smile. "Mr. Mac, you're here." At this time, a forthright voice sounded from the side. Meg turned around with a smile, and said, "I've kept the City Lord and Miss Hill waiting. Mamie's is the face of Chaos City now." It's naturally important to satisfy the customers. Besides, we just finished our discussion. Mr. Mac, you came at the right time. Michael shook his head with a smile. Hill smiled at Meg and said, Mr. Meg is very punctual. However, if you're going back to prepare dinner, let's start the assessment first. Miss Hill, you know me well. Let's go and take a look now. Meg nodded. Of course, it was very important to go back and prepare dinner. After all, he didn't even apply for leave. It wouldn't be good to stand up a customer for no reason. Mr. Meg, please come with me. The chief engineer at the side led Meg to the centermost hanging platform, and a human-powered lift lifted them up to the platform. Mr. Meg is the designer, and you've made the actual product yourself. Naturally, you're very familiar with the structure of the steam locomotive. However, during the manufacturing process, we made some changes to the details after our discussion. Burrell led Meg around the steam locomotive and began to explain it in detail. An hour later, Meg handed a page that was almost filled with words to Burrell, and smilingly said, The parts that I think need to be changed are all here. You can refer to it, Chief Burrell. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 953. Mr. Meg's suggestion hit the nail on the head and solved many of our problems. We should have consulted you earlier. Blair solemnly put away the piece of paper and looked at Meg with some shame. If he had doubts when he first took over the steam locomotive project, his admiration for Meg, the designer, grew stronger as the project progressed. Furthermore, after today's on-site inspection, Meg pointed out the crux of the problem, and even provided the simplest solution. This made Burrell admire Meg even more. Such a person could only be called a genius if he could come up with a bold and imaginative idea that could be implemented. You flatter me. Although there are some problems that have to be solved, if there is a straight track here, we should be able to conduct a straight driving test. Meg said with a smile. He, who was standing on the shoulders of his predecessors, did not feel that he had anything to be proud of. Blair, who could build such a steam locomotive in such a short time with only a blueprint and a simple model, was worthy of the title of a great engineer. There is a straight track of about 1 kilometer in the base. Blair's face lit up, but he lowered his voice and said, But before the trial run, we have to clear the place first. Meg nodded slightly. It seemed that even within the project, it was also confidential. The two of them landed again. Blair briefly reported the situation to Michael and the Hill, and then began to command the clearing work. The busy dwarf blacksmiths and mages were quickly ordered to leave and enter the passage at the side. The entire cave suddenly became quiet and empty. The lift platform slowly lowered and lowered the steam locomotive to the ground. The staff entered the locomotive and shoveled coal into the boiler. Black smoke rose from the chimney. The air pressure has reached the threshold. Start. Woo woo woo, following the voice of the staff, a loud whistle sounded. Steam gushed out, and the huge steam locomotive began to move forward slowly. Besides. The friction between the train wheels and the rails made a deafening sound. The ground trembled slightly as if a giant beast was slowly awakening. The steam locomotive began to speed up and move forward steadily. They didn't rely on any animal power, nor did they need any magicians or knights to control them. They were just a group of ordinary people, and yet they were able to make such a huge creature run. The spacious carriage could carry far more goods than any other carriage. Most importantly, it didn't need to rest. As long as there was enough coal, it could keep moving. This was something that no other means of transportation could do. The Hill and Michael's eyes lit up. In their hearts, they had already drawn a blueprint. I'm used to seeing high-speed trains that travel at hundreds of kilometers per hour. I'm not used to seeing these stupid guys who can't even compare to green skins. Meg sighed. He was finally going to change the world. Because the track was limited, it began to slow down before reaching its maximum speed. Finally, it stopped at the end of the track. Michael took the lead in clapping, and everyone else followed suit. Blair and the staff members who came down from the steam engine couldn't hide their excitement. After half a month of hard work in this dark cave, their efforts had not been in vain. Michael said emotionally, "I believe that it won't be long before this big guy can change the world, and you are the creators of all of this. I'm honored to be able to witness this important moment." There was another burst of cheers in the cave. Meg declined the invitation to the celebration banquet on the hill and left the construction base early. The secretary who brought him here sent him back to Amy's. Compared to the celebration banquet, it was naturally more important to make dinner for the guests. It's obviously to make money. The system's voice sounded with some disdain. Isn't it natural to bring happiness to the guests and realize the value of life at the same time? Meg said matter-of-factly. It was already 4:00 when he returned to the restaurant. Meg immediately immersed himself in preparing the ingredients. He was still unable to estimate how much profit the 10% shares of the steam locomotive and 20% shares of the steam engine products would bring him, but there was no possibility of cashing out in the short term. Moreover, this was like the shares of Tencent and Alibaba in their early stages. It was undoubtedly the smartest thing to do for a long time. No one knew better than him that once the steam engine era began, it would roll forward unstoppably. Of course, Meg also thought that if he directly negotiated with the Hill and gave up these 2 shares, he might be able to get enough money to buy the points needed to restore his peak strength directly from the system. This idea had been circling in his mind for a long time, but he was not confident that he would be able to get enough money from the Hill and Michael during the negotiation. The most difficult part of this system that could make one stronger by spending money was the exponential increase in the purchase price of physical strength points. Who knew how much it would charge the next time? System, calculate for me. If I were to open a restaurant like this, how many years would it take to restore my peak strength and buy the points from you? I really want to live for another 500 years, I really want to live for another 500 years. A vicissitude song echoed in Meg's mind. Meg was speechless. System, you will be beaten to death sooner or later if you continue like this. Meg rolled his eyes. It seemed that he really needed to be more careful. It doesn't matter if you don't want to borrow it for another 500 years. Elephant Eat Bar is here to help you. Host, due to your lack of enthusiasm in using Elephant Eat Bar, the system has specially launched a 1-month red packet promotion. A huge reward will be given for free. As long as you can promote Elephant Eat Bar and let them search for 568,464,257, you will receive an additional reward. The system said enthusiastically. Crazy, I am the only one using the system. I am the only user of Elephant Eat Bar. Do you think you are a flower? Promote it. Get lost. Meg rolled his eyes. This system was so fickle and did not consider the situation at all. When he was often on Weibo's trending searches, there were many people who used his name to post such advertisements. Naturally, he would not do such a thing. The sun gradually set in the west, and Amy returned to the restaurant. After dinner, it was time for the longest and busiest dinner hours. There are so many people in this restaurant. Is there something good to eat? Before I came, my father told me that there must be something good in a crowded place. I just don't know if it is expensive. If it is too expensive, my heart will ache. In the distance, a giant dragon who had shrunk to a height of 5 meters but still maintained its dragon form looked in the direction of Amy's. It hesitated for a while, but still walked in the direction of the restaurant. If it is expensive, I will eat and dash. This is what my father taught me. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, wonderful book mobile version website, .com. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.